The meeting will come to order. Welcome everyone, and a special welcome to our veterans who are here today. It's Veterans Day, and I'd first like to ask if we have any veterans in the audience. Please stand if you're a veteran. And thank you for being here on this day, and we appreciate your service. And Dr. Royster, I'd also like to express our appreciation for the Veterans Day programs that are taking place in many of our schools today. That's very honorable. And by participating in Veterans Day programs, our students can gain a deeper appreciation for the freedoms they take for granted and the dedication required to protect them. Additionally, these programs foster community connections and instill values of gratitude and respect in our students. And I'd just like to say, on behalf of the Board, a special thank you to all of our schools who are honoring our veterans today. We appreciate it very much. Our first matter of business is the approval of the consent calendar. We have a recommended motion from the administration. Do I have a maker of the motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Mosley.
I move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Mosley has made a motion. Dr. Presley has made a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. Our second matter of business is the appearance of visitors, and we have no visitors today. Our third matter of business is administration, and Ms. Middleton, I'm going to ask you to chair this section today, and you have the floor at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me see. First matter of business is item 3.01, Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Dr. Royster, would you like to speak to this?
Only to turn it over to Ms. Stack, and I believe I saw David here somewhere.
Yeah, he's here.
Oh. Turn it over to Ms. Stack and Green Finney Horton to present the ACFRA.
Good morning, everyone. Today we have Dave Phillips here with us. He's partnered with Green Finney Colley, and he's going to do a presentation on our FY25 audit.
All right. Normally at this time we've actually gone final with the reports, but with the federal government shutdown, the OMB has not issued the final 2025 compliance supplement, and then also the state won't issue their annual audit guide until they get the compliance supplement. So we're kind of in a holding pattern. Even though we may be hearing that the government may reopen soon, we just don't know how long of a pipeline it may take for them to get back doing these drafts and issuing the final report. So our hope was to go ahead and present to you what we think. They have issued some drafts, what we think will be the final draft. And if there aren't any changes, hopefully we won't have to see y'all again. But if there are some significant changes that come out in that compliance supplement or in the annual audit guide from the state, then we may have to revisit it. So that's kind of where we are. So if you don't mind, we'll walk through this PowerPoint. We've always found that this is a little bit easier than going through about a 200-page ACFR. But again, we like to remind everybody that these are your financial statements. And our responsibility as your auditor is to issue an opinion, and we have issued an unmodified. That's kind of a strange term, but that's a clean opinion. If we modified our report, we would say everything looks good except for this. So since we didn't modify it, it's unmodified. We're not aware of any significant issues there. All right, well, let's look at your fund balance. Your total fund balance decreased about $33 million. We're going to talk about that in a second. The chart kind of gives you a little bit of history there. You have some non-spendable fund balance of about $12 million, some committed fund balance of about $7 million, So then we come over to the unassigned category, which means there's no constraints. It's available for spending at your discretion. And that balance is about $203 million, which is about 23% of your 2025 actual expenditures, and that is about 21% of your 2026 budgeted expenditures. The GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, they're kind of like the Bible of governments. They recommend a minimum of 2 months. And as you see, you actually have a board policy of 8.33 of the 2026 budget, which would be about 80 million. So you can see you're well positioned in regards to those measurements there. All right, so why do you want to have a strong fund balance? Again, remember your property taxes, those bills usually go out in October, right? People pay them in December if they want the deduction that year. Otherwise, they pay them in the first quarter. So a lot of that real property tax comes in about a 3-month period of time there. And so you kind of receive it, and you've got to carry it over for the rest of the year. It helps you with emergencies. So what we're seeing with the federal government is a perfect illustration. Things could be put on hold for a little while. And if you're not able to get those monies from the federal government, that means you're going to have to pay them for a while until you get reimbursed. It gives you flexibility. It gives you also better interest rates when you go to issue debt. If they see you have a good track record, you manage your fund balance well, they're going to give you better interest rates and a better rating there. And again, it just helps you with any changes on the state level as well. Well, let's look at your general fund revenues. They were about $890 million. You can see kind of the breakout there, 343 in property taxes, 531 almost in state government, and the rest in other sources there. This was an increase of about 5%, and we kind of list those areas to kind of keep in mind. On the local property tax front, you had an increase of about over budget of about $28.6 million. Remember, you had that $1.5 million increase. That's about 1% for y'all. And then you had a growth in your assessed values, which were about 6%. And so that is what generated that higher property tax collection over budget. Remember, too, rates are still a little higher than everybody thought. We thought the interest rates were going to really start coming down a lot more in fiscal year, really in 25. We may see that really start kicking in more in 26. So you came in with a lot higher investment earnings. And plus your staff is just being conservative. I mean, you don't know what those interest rates are, and you sure don't want to put them at 5. And so you're wanting to be kind of cautious in how you estimate those revenues. And again, your state revenues came in, and remember that new funding formula from a few years ago. That was about $5.9 million there. All right, well, let's look at your expenditures here. Again, close to $898 million. We kind of list the areas, but you're a people business. So, what really drives your increases are really salary and benefits. And so remember, this past year, you always have the step that kick in every year. Remember, too, you had some certificate upgrades. You also, on the teacher salary schedule, you increased them by $2,700. You've made some very conscious efforts in your budget, and that's what's driving that increase. Now, remember, too, on the health insurance front, we've seen the health insurance really go up. It went up about 4% on 1/1 of 24, and it's gone up about 12% on 1/1 of 25. So you just always, those salary and benefits are the pressure that's driving those costs there. As it relates to your budget, though, you came in under budget, 23.9. Some of that, again, is just that you're budgeting that everybody's going to be there a whole year. Well, reality doesn't always turn out that way. And so that is a lot of times what drives the savings under budget. The real good takeaway here is on the very bottom there. Because you had higher revenue that we just talked about in the previous slide, you had less expenditures than you were expecting. you were able to make a big transfer over into your capital projects fund to deal with some improvements and get ahead of the game there. And so that, you had transfers of about 73 million, transfers out of about 98.5. The transfers in are the monies generally coming from EIA, indirect costs that come over and reimburse and support your general fund there. All right, well, let's look at some of your other major funds. The Special Revenue Fund, it has lots of different programs in there, federal and state. We mentioned a couple like Title I, IDA, and so forth. The total revenues in that fund were about $92 million. There was a big decrease, but remember, ESSER is kind of winding down. It's going away for everybody. We had some of our districts that still had some it would have been the first quarter of your fiscal year 25, because they really needed to be obligated by 9/30 of 24. You really didn't hardly have any because you had already spent most of those resources there. Also on down, you remember a number of years ago, the pupil activity funds were moved inside of these special revenue funds. And so you have a remaining fund balance for that of about $19.7 million within the special revenue fund. The Education Improvement Act, you have about 20 programs there. You had total revenues of about $85 million, but remember there's a really big transfer out there, aid to classrooms, that's coming over to the general fund to support it. All right, let's briefly look at your debt service fund. You have about $13.5 million set aside for debt service. On your capital projects fund, you have about $425 million that's available to deal and work on the projects that you have at hand and some future projects. Remember, this was an increase of about $35 million in the fund balance there. And remember how we talked to you about that transfer coming in? You see it coming in from the general fund of 96.7. And then you also had some coming in from the food service fund. But then, of course, you still had cost and construction on these various projects. And so that's why there's a net increase of the 35, because you had money coming in, but you also had construction costs ongoing as well. On your food service fund, have about $28 million in fund balance. This was a decrease of about 1.4, and part of that was that transfer out to help deal with some fans, capital items inside of that capital projects fund. All right, let's look at your total capital assets. They're approximately $1.3 billion. They increased about $81 million over the prior year. So we had additions of about $143 million, but remember, when we capitalize something, we begin to depreciate it over its estimated useful life, and that depreciation was about $62 million. On the various projects that were outstanding at June 30th, you had commitments of about $58 million. Remember, that changes every month. So you could enter into a new contract with a developer or whatever, contractor, and that would go up. And as you make payments, it comes down. So that's kind of a fluid number, but that's what it was as of June 30th. All right, well, let's look at your long-term debt. You have about $329 million there. It decreased about $75.7 million over the prior year. Not a lot of unusual activity. You just kind of made your regularly scheduled principal payments there and had a little bit of amortization of your premiums. Your debt service for the year we're in right now, fiscal year 26, is about $93 million. That's like your mortgage payment. So your mortgage payment for fiscal year 26 is about $93 million. This year, we had to adopt a new GASB on compensated absences. It made us re-look. It's kind of a different methodology, and we had to restate those government-wide statements for about $38 million. We had to increase the liability for this recording more sick leave and so forth based on this new accounting standard. There's a lot of disclosure about that in Note 1B if you want to read more about it. All right, remember too, you participate in the state retirement plans. And your overall net pension liability is about $984 million. Now, remember, the takeaway there is not that they're going to ask you to write them a check for roughly $1 billion. What they're going to do, though, and they have been doing, is they've raised those rates. And remember, in fiscal year 24 was the last year they had a 1% rate increase. There were 5 years, and there was a gap year because of COVID. But they raised them 5% roughly in 6 years. You're now at the highest rates. And the hope is that these higher rates, that it will begin to have enough collections on the state level that that liability will start coming down. And so your net pension liability there is an estimate. It's based on your proportionate contributions to the plan as a percentage of all of them. And then that's the percentage you get of the liability, which is 23-some billion dollars. And so that's kind of how that methodology works. So you notice here the liability actually went down a little bit. So the question is this starting to work? We'll find out in the years ahead. But unfortunately, on the next slide, you also participate in the OPEB liability. That's retiree health insurance. And that liability went up $155.7 million. And so that balance now, the liability is about $845 million. So, you know, they maybe gave on one side, but they took away far more on the other side there. The thing there is the contribution rate. It's at right now 6.35%. We expect that that rate is going to have to go up in future years because that plan right now is only funded at about 10%. There's only 10 cents on every dollar that is needed one day for retiree health insurance. So my hope is that maybe the pension starts doing well and they can lower those rates, and at the same time, maybe the OPEB goes up and they can offset that so it's not hitting you on both sides. All right, just wanted to mention to you, there is one new change in accounting principle for next year. It's called the Financial Reporting Model Improvements. And what they're wanting there is in your management's discussion and analysis, which is inside of your ACFR, they want more meaningful discussion. And then the next thing they want is on your budgetary comparison schedule, which is right behind your notes. They want explanations for why you're over or under budget. And if you amend your budget, why did you amend it? So that's going to actually create some, you know, new disclosure and work next year. And your finance team may look at that and look to y'all maybe seeing about amending that budget, you know, during the year or near the year end so that those variants aren't that large. And that's some of the things you're going to have to factor, or would you rather explain them? So that's coming for next year. From a compliance standpoint, we looked at 3 of your federal programs, Title I, Title II, and IDEA. We did not have any issues noted. There is also another letter that was sent out to you. It's kind of a required communication letter. And if there were difficulties that we had in the audit, we would communicate those in there. Like, let's just say management was very tough to deal with, or they didn't want to book a journal entry we thought needed to be booked. We would need to make you aware of that. There were no issues like that. But we do mention one thing in there. Just remember the risk associated with pupil activity funds. You know, probably once every 3 to 5 years, something's going to hit the paper. And there's no way to kind of probably alleviate that without spending more money than you could ever lose. I mean, you'd have to hire 2 bookkeepers for every location. And so you just got to realize there's going to be some risk. Your staff, I think, does a really good job of trying to go out and do spot audits, make sure they're reconciling their bank accounts and so forth. But to totally eliminate the risk would cost you so much more than what you could potentially lose there. All right, last slide. I want to remind you, unmodified, I know that's a good thing. That's a strange term. You have good financial condition, and the staff here, again, were really great to work with. Questions? I know I go quick. Most people like that.
Thank you very much. We do have a recommended motion from the administration. Do I have a maker of the motion? Anybody to make the motion?
Madam Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Sailors.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the administration's recommendation and approve the annual comprehensive financial audit report as presented.
Okay, we had a maker of the motion and a second. Now, are there any questions? Or any discussion?
Ms. Middleton, if I might speak to it before you engage questions or discussion. Just a brief
absolutely.
explanatory
Yes,
note.
thank you.
Although it's in your board documents, and David referenced it, they cannot fully complete the audit because of the federal government shutdown. You all will probably remember that there is a state statutory requirement that our audit be submitted by December 1. The state informed us 2-3 weeks ago that they will accept the incomplete audit as compliance with that statutory requirement. Then it's incumbent on us to then send them the completed audit whenever Green Finney can finish the audit. So the motion is worded a little differently. If they have no findings, we'll simply send a copy to them. If there should be any findings that arise by that motion, we will come back to the board and they will present those findings before we submit it. But that way we'll be in compliance with the state statute. You will not have to act on this a second time unless there is some change upon which to act. I just wanted to make sure we were clear about that and everyone understood that. Thank you.
Is the motion adequate as is then for now? Okay. Mr. Cochran, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. As part of the management letter that we received, there's a paragraph there on page 1 that says the school, and I know you touched on this during your presentation, but it says the school district adopted GASB statement number 101, compensated absences for the year ended June 30th, 2025. The adoption of GSAB 101 had no impact on the school district's governmental and financial statements, but has resulted in a restatement of the school district's beginning net position. And then it goes on to say, as you alluded to earlier, that the net position of the school district's government-wide financial statements as of July the 1st, 2024 was decreased by approximately, as you said, just under 38 million. And so I was just wondering, first of all, where it says GASB 101, what those letters stand for.
Yeah, that's a Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and so they issued all the governmental accounting rules. And this was a change that they recently made.
And then as far as all the rest, where it says, again, that it was decreased by approximately 38 million, but then there was no change in our finances. I think it basically says, I was just wondering if you could just take a minute or two and provide a little bit further explanation of that. And the notes, and maybe I overlooked something, as you said, there's a couple of notes listed in there. And unfortunately, though, I'm not sure if we have that or if I've overlooked it, but I was just wondering if you could explain that a bit further for us.
Okay. You know, like when we had to back in 2015, like add your pension liability to those government-wide statements, we had to add your OPEB liability in 2018. Long-term items don't show up on the general fund or on your special revenue funds or those. So this accrued compensated absences is viewed as a long-term liability like pensions. And so when you see your general fund or what your staff presents to you, it has no impact on that. It's an accrual, it's an estimate of what you think you will ultimately pay out for people's vacation and sick leave. And that's what it is. And they want to get that on those government-wide statements so you can kind of see what the worst case, what that gross liability would be. But it does not show up on your general fund. So that's why when we say it had no financial impact on the governmental funds, that's kind of why we say that. But on those government-wide statements, which are kind of hard to understand anyway because they're a deficit because you got these big pension liabilities and OPEB liabilities. We just added another 38 million liability for this OPEB for that purpose too. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. That's all, Ms. Middleton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Is there any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I guess we can take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Our second item of business is the procurement audit. And Dr. Royster, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, ma'am, particularly because this is in a different format than it has been in previous years. Green Finney Colley also conducted the procurement audit. But make sure, David, I say this the right way, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. The audit he just presented is based on their assessment of our financial status in accordance with the generally accepted principles of accounting and the Government Accounting Standards Board requirements. I'm good so far, right now? Okay. The procurement audit is based on their examination of all of our procurements and a report generated in accord with what the Chief State Procurement Officer wishes to have a report on. Still good, right? Which is a change from the last procurement audit you saw, which was 3 years ago. The other change that you might note, this is a 3-year audit, but you'll see reference to each individual fiscal year. In the past, you saw them really lumped together. Going forward, you will see an annual procurement audit reflecting the audit of one fiscal year. So in the information sent to you is literally every procedure they undertook which aligns with those required by the Chief State Procurement Office. Under each procedure they undertook will be a note of finding. If you look at the very first one, you'll see no findings were noted. But if you go down to procedure number 3, there was a finding. The district's MBE plans were not submitted in a timely manner to the board. And then you will see their recommendation, and you will see the district's response. What you might be familiar with seeing in an audit, like the internal audits we send to you, is a finding and management response. Very similar to that. In this case, you will see the district's response. I think in all of those findings, changes that Mr. Pettit has undertaken in procurement have addressed each of those. But we certainly present those. You've had those for your information, and we would be glad to entertain any particular question that you might have about any one or any number of those. Just wanted to explain that a little bit because it is very different from procurement's audits you've seen in the past, which tended to just be a summary, very, very small, very condensed summary. This is more like an internal audit. You see, it's not really like the external auditor's report on the ACFR. So it's more similar to that, but again, not based on these established principles, but on what the State Procurement Office wishes to see examined. And this is incumbent on every school district to do that in this manner.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. We do have a motion from the administration on this one. I need a maker of the motion.
Madam Chair, I would like to motion that we recommend from the administration to accept the fiscal year 22 through 24 procurement audit as presented.
Thank you. And we have a maker of the motion, and we have a second. Any discussion? Dr. Presley, I believe you had your motions. You wanted a question?
Just a quick point of clarification. Dr. Royster, I see we have 13 instances involving a P card. Do we have a ballpark number of the the total number of P-card transactions for a district this size. I'm just trying to understand, because 13 instances in however many P-card transactions, how many would we say ballpark, y'all?
Mr. Pettit, you can speak to that, or Ms. Stack can.
I believe it exceeds 100,000 transactions a year.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification on that.
Thank you. Ms. Doolin?
Thank you. I have a question about those cards as well. It notes that there were a few purchases that were above the single transaction limit, and I wondered what that limit is.
Pettit?
During this audit period, the single transaction limit on the P card was the competition threshold of $1,500.
I wonder with inflation, does that limit, do we still feel like that limit is reasonable, or?
Oh, good point. With the adoption of the new procurement code, that limit is now
5,000. Yep.
5,000.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cochran?
Thank you. As part of the procurement audit report that we were given, on page 4 of that, first of all, one of the procedures was the review of a 2-month sample of transactions to check for splitting of orders or favored vendors. And it noted that apparently within that 2-month sample, that there were 40 instances over those three years where there appears to be splitting violations in the 2 months that were selected. So I'm assuming that the 2 months were selected and then they were looked at in 3 separate years there. But when we are saying splitting violations, what exactly is that?
Here's a common example of that, and I'm sure Mr. Pettit can provide more. One of the most frequent uses of procurement are maintenance techs. They're constantly buying because they got repairs to make, systems down, equipment down. So if you had a tech go in to a vendor and in the same day and buy something from a vendor that we don't have a % off agreement with, and I'll explain that in just a minute. So go into the Acme Corporation and buy some part or component that they need. And at that time, that transaction limit was $1,500. So that costs $1,400, and they go back in there the same day and charge to the same job another $500. They have artificially split that purchase. Now, a lot of times that motivation is to, back to Ms. Doolin's point about $1,500 being a pretty low limit, to get something done, get it repaired, get it fixed. So that's the most common way that a transaction is split and it violates the procurement code. Now, you can go in there twice to the same vendor in the same day if you're buying for 2 different jobs. The other thing that might happen is you could go work on something, go out, put something in, go back to the same place and get another part for the same job the same day that you didn't know you needed beforehand and charge it. And you've split the invoice, but you had no intention to do that because you didn't know you needed that when you did it the first time, when you entered the first transaction, if that makes sense. % off, we have certain places that we utilize with great frequency, particularly supply houses for maintenance materials that we buy in such volume. We have a % off negotiated ahead of time discount. When they buy there, then you don't get into the issue of splitting invoices. In essence, you have bid for the acquisition of those materials from those suppliers, and they would go to the one that's closest to the job because we have them with vendors throughout the county. if that makes sense.
That same report, page 5, towards the middle of page 5, it says, we selected a sample of 25 direct expenditure vouchers for the year that ended 2024, and then some for the next, for 2 other years, I think, as well, to determine that they were handled in accordance with the district's procurement code. And then, as part of the finding, it says that we noted per inquiry and review of the district's procurement code that each of the items selected for testing needed a PO, but did not have one. So, I mean, it makes it sound like that none of those, they all needed a PO and none of them had one. I was just wondering if someone could address that.
Mr. Pettit, I think, is best able to speak to that, but I believe they were procured correctly. They just did not obtain a purchase order for them. But you can give some examples of that, I think, Mr. Pettit.
Yes, essentially, the prior approval from procurement did not occur. They received an invoice and needed it paid. Under the old code, we had an informal process to address those actions. In conjunction with the new code, we've actually established procedures for the direct expenditures so that they flow through procurement for review of compliance before they're actually paid. So the prior code years did not have a requirement to have those procedures in place. We were audited under these agreed-upon procedures, which really are established under the new code. So there was kind of that lag of having the old code being audited under new code procedures and now having those procedures in place to address the direct expenditure vouchers as they flow through for payment.
Couple more questions. Down at the bottom of page 5, the procedure says we selected and tested 3 construction procurements and 2 architectural and engineering procurements for compliance. And then the finding says that we noted 4 instances of architects not being appropriately procured. There again, I was just wondering if somebody could speak more on that.
They were all legacy architects for I don't know how many years, over 20 years, because it was in place when I came here. The district's decision, the board's decision about securing an architect and engineer for a existing renovation or addition to existing building was to go back to the architect of record for that building. You all may recall being informed of that when we've added on or renovated a building, referring to that as a legacy architect. The procurement code at that time didn't address that. It does address that now and provides for a provision to do that. And for some reason, there was not documentation for 4 of those, but documentation exists for all the others that they examined during the same period. But there was not one circumstance in the 4 where it was not, in fact, the legacy architect for that building. Is that correct, Mr. Pettit?
That's correct. And we actually addressed that legacy architect issue in our exemptions that the board approved in conjunction with that new code last fall.
The majority of the documentation we have at this point, is that on paper generally when we say we don't have documentation for something? Is that something that we have in folders on paper, or is that all done electronically, or how does that usually work?
Well, the period of this audit, it would be both. Most everything I think now going forward with the adoption of that new software is all electronically tracked. One of the things that's an example of what you referenced, there was missing some documentation where someone had violated the procurement code, and most of those were addressed by email, and they could not locate, I think, 3 or 4 of them. They located other ones. But now they're in that system. So if you violate procurement, which happens from time, because many things as are purchased, and as many people who are involved in purchasing things, they may unintentionally break procurement. You have to put them on notice in writing that they broke it, how they broke it, and what should happen going forward. Well, if you can't produce that document, that becomes a finding. If you produce the document, it's not a finding.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Milt.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell, you had a question?
Yes, it's the same about the legacy architects. And so we have a new procurement and software, but it's saying that the legacy architects are still, they're under board-approved exemption. Is that still the case, or are they going under the new procurement codes that we have? Or do they still have an exemption?
So previously, under this code we were audited under, there was no exemption for legacy architects. There was a board policy. The board policy conflicted with that old code. When we went to the new code, we actually addressed this issue because it was board policy and established an exemption to allow legacy architects to be selected without the competition process because they were the original constructors or designers of the building.
So we need to change policy in order for them to be like everybody else in procurement.
It wouldn't be required to change the policy because that issue is addressed in the exemptions that y'all approved.
So they are still exempt? the
They're now
legacy
exempt.
architects?
They were not exempt previously. Now in the new code, they are exempt.
They were exempt by the board's policy and practice, which did not align with the procurement code. When we adopted the new procurement code, you may recall, we brought to you some exemptions that we recommended and you all approved. One of those exemptions now aligns our new procurement code with your existing policy. So we can still utilize legacy architects. It is a more efficient system of selecting architects and engineers to get somebody who did the original work. So it simply now aligns the two documents, your actual policy, which was also our practice, and the procurement code.
We essentially formalized that action in an exemption, formalized the policy and the code. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Presley.
I'm breaking my own rule and speaking twice over a particular matter, but I think this is, this needs to be said, because sometimes when we get into conversations, lengthy ones and questions in the weeds about things like procurement codes and stuff like that, first of all, they are extremely essential, okay, to make sure that we're very clear on what we've spent and where it's going and that we're following the procedures. But y'all, what this boils down to is time, okay? And in real time, in order to be nimble and to be reactive in the very best of ways for what our children need, be it a facility, be it a resource, be it whatever, all of these steps create additional time between our being able to purchase or provide and all of the things that have to take place in front. Again, highly necessary, but I want to commend the district on doing this as quickly as they do and following all of the rules and all of the steps. But when you think about children and you think about that being our why, to be able to provide things in real time very quickly when we identify a need, procurement is something that we have to be very good at, and I believe that our district remains committed to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Presley. Let me take this opportunity to say that appreciate the excellent work that Mr. Pettit has done with making this system compliant, but as nimble and as efficient as it can be. Because to your point, we spend, particularly on the facilities side, between Mars procurements and routine maintenance and repair, but we're spending tens of millions of dollars a year. Renovation, replacement of aging systems, and it's also extremely important to us on that side that just like industry, the last thing any industry wants is downtime, where you're not being productive. For us, not having an appropriate environment for students obviously is downtime that greatly impacts productivity for our students, for our teachers, for our schools. So we want to minimize any downtime, that we're not losing time because of loss of heat, loss of cool, water issue, anything like that. To your point, it's extremely important that we be able to be responsive, be efficient, but at the same time, make certain that we're following the rules that are set up to be followed. And just like this report, that we're very transparent about when we have, to some degree, not met those standards. But to the point you made earlier, we have a huge number of transactions being made daily by a large number of people, whether that be an instructional supplier material or a maintenance supplier material or anything else that we procure. So we wish there were no findings in this report, but it provides us an opportunity to make sure we are doing things the way we're supposed to do. And if there are places to tighten up, that we have guidance as to where that needs to be happen. I think Mr. Pettit's done a very good job with meeting those requirements, but also not stifling the ability to get things done.
Thank you. Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. I did have one extra question. I was just wondering, I know it's referenced in the report, but no date was given, as to when we actually did have the last P-card audit. And if that was done, I assume it was done internally by the internal audit folks.
Dr. Turner, you want to speak to that P-card audit? 'Cause I believe the last one was internal audit.
See if I can find it. Give me a second. If I can get my email to pull up.
Dr. Turner, I found an email in February addressing this question. Fiscal year 23 student activity funds P-card audit was conducted by internal audit department.
That's correct.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. I thought perhaps you dozed off there for a
No,
minute.
I was looking
I
at,
wasn't sure.
I thought he was watching a movie or something.
I was looking over 6,000 emails to find the one that was,
So if that one was for student activity funds, has there been a comprehensive one in recent years covering everything that the P-cards are potentially used for?
Last general fund P-card audit, you know when that was, Ms. Stack?
2018, 2019.
Thank you.
We'll add that to the internal audit list. It is already there?
It's already added, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Middleton.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments or discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Hearing none, then that motion carries. I will, that is the end of section 3, so I will turn it back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Middleton. Our fourth matter of business is instruction. And Mr. Sailors, you'll be chairing this section, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, the first item of business under the instruction portion today is item 4.01, which is a report for the 2025 test scores and school report card update. It'll be given by Dr. Jason McCrary for information only. Dr. Royster, do you have anything to offer?
Just simply as a reminder, we would like to have presented this much earlier because we were talking about the 25 school year. But as you all know, the report card data was embargoed until last Monday. So some of this will be a repetition of what you've already seen reported, but we did want to make sure that we presented it formally to the board and also provide opportunity for Dr. McCreary to answer any questions around the report card data and the items contained therein. Dr. McCreary?
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. Good to be with you. Excited to present the information in this report card because it is historical. Probably, I know you've all seen the information. You've also had opportunities to review information regarding SC Ready and end of course exams, so I'm not going to repeat that information. You have access to it, and that was a couple of months back. The report cards were delayed for many reasons, but we think they got them right, and I'm here today to present those to you. First of all, I want to say a big thank you. There's no one person who made, as we review the results, there's no one person that we can point to say, hey, this person made it happen, because it takes everyone. It takes the board fulfilling their responsibility and providing the resources. It takes the superintendent with vision and execution, with a great administration to follow up. It takes great quality teachers and principals doing their jobs, and also, most importantly, it takes students working hard and the parents who are supporting them to see the outcomes that we see. The purpose of the state report cards for South Carolina, which have been around for over 2 decades, is to inform parents and the public of the information that we'll present, and it's also to report on student performance. Some reminders before we get started. You may forget, because we only really speak about the details of the report cards publicly once a year. Child development centers, career centers do not receive report cards. The district does not receive, nor does any other district receive report cards. And the Washington Center does not receive an overall rating. In South Carolina, accountability changes a lot. These are the dates to this release's accountability criteria or rules of accountability for the report card. And you can see how many times they've been updated. And if we also look, some of these are not significant, others are significant changes, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But accountability is changing. Accountability is changing in 25, 26, which I'll discuss with you as well. And we'll have more before the school year ends. So the rules that we're playing by right now, I'm certain that there'll be some changes before the school year is over. You don't have to read all of this, but just note, for this report card release in 24-25, one big change was we had new ELA standards. Because of the new ELA standards, one of the indicators on the report card is called student progress. So accountability for student progress had to change fairly significantly, and I'll discuss it more. But student progress changed. There's 4 primary targets, 3 different measures. One's a value-added measure of VAM. The other 2 are added value targets, or added value, which is the median annual target and the added value target. So essentially for ELA, this past report card, they had to do away with the median and the added value targets, those 2 targets, because you have to have 2 years of data. We changed the science standards. We don't have 2 years of data. We only have 1. So for ELA, only VAM counted, value-added measure. It's flipping for math this year, new math standards. So for student progress, we're only going to be counting VAM and not the added value targets. Another change coming this year, the Education Oversight Committee primarily sets these rules, in the State Department of Education. They're the ones who implement the report card. So the Education Oversight Committee changed the SAT total score from a 10-20 for this report card, still exists, but for next year's report card, which is this school year's reporting, it moves to a 10-40. Also changes for the third year on track to graduate, which I'll explain what that is a little bit later. It was reported only, but now all 3 years of on track to graduate are scored and becomes part of the report card, along with the fifth-year success rate. In general, when I'm talking about the report card, I'm talking about the bottom right. And our principals know this very well, as the principal supervisors do, because this is their scorecard. You'll see elementary and middle schools there in the middle, and you can see the points. The overall scale is from 0 to 100. And you can just add those numbers, 35 plus 35 plus 10 there in the middle for elementary and middle schools, and you can see that SC Ready counts, and SC Ready counts for 80 points out of 100. So essentially for elementary and middle school, you're talking about the end of year tests. Academic achievements, 35 points, student progress is 35 points, and prepping for success is 10 points. Prep for success is 4th and 6th grade science for elementary and middle schools. For high schools, you can see it's a little bit different. 25 points for academic achievement, that's at the end of course assessments, which I'll go into a little bit later, and preparing for success, also in the course. Academic achievement in the course is math, which is Algebra 1 and English 2, and preparing for success is Biology 1 and U.S. History. And then we have other factors as well, both for elementary, middle, and our high school. So school climate, it's a survey that our teachers and students take around February, March of each year. Counts 10 points for elementary and middle and 5 points for high school. Multilingual learners progress, or what you'll refer to as ML progress. It's the only subgroup that counts for a significant part of the report card. There's other subgroups that are reported, like socioeconomic status subgroup, racial subgroups, students with disabilities, special education subgroups, but there are no other subgroups that count towards points for the report card, with the exception of ML students, which counts 10 points for both elementary, middle, and high schools. Graduation rate counts 19 points. High school student success, which I'll talk about, is 12 points. College career readiness is also 19 points. This is a look at the subgroups which are reported. I highlighted there in orange English learners, which is the federal term. We term those ML, synonymous, multilingual learner. You can see there's check marks by those which are reported on the report card because it's federally required, and then there are other arrows which are by other subgroups listed because those are state reported. So multilingual learner is someone who's born outside the 50 U.S. states, D.C. or Puerto Rico, and they're newly enrolled into a U.S. school. If they have been in a U.S. school and they for some time and their home language is English, likely they're not ML. They have to, if you're an ML student, you still have to take all of the assessments. But some of them aren't counted, which is what this slide shows. And they have a certain number of years before some of these indicators count towards the report card. For example, in year 1, for ML students, they're excluded from the report card, counting towards the report card for academic achievement and preparing for success for elementary, middle, and high schools, and also from student progress for elementary and middle schools. In year 2, they're excluded from, again, the academic indicators. In year 3, they're included in everything. Now, I'm going to focus, those are just some reminders for you. Now I'm going to focus on the actual indicators. So for the achievement indicator, the achievement indicators, you see the points for elementary, middle, and high school. This one's probably the most straightforward. It's based on the ELA and math, and of course SC Alt ELA and math. Students get points based on the categories in which they score. If it's in the EOC, then they get a score from 0 to 100, an F through an A. The higher they score, the more points they get. Same thing for elementary school and middle school. The higher they score, the more points they get. You get more points for a score that exceeds expectations than you do for does not meet expectations, as an example. For preparing for success in elementary and middle schools, that's your 4th and 6th grade science scores. And so you can instantly tell for preparing for success, the 4th grade science, 4th grade carries the school for these points. And in high school, it's Biology 1 and U.S. History. Talked about multilingual learners progress indicator. Again, the only subgroup that provides potential points for the report card up to 10. ML students, when they come in, they take the WIDA Access Assessment. For that WIDA Access Assessment, once they have that benchmark, they then have up to 5 years to score a composite score of 4.4. So that is the threshold to which they're trying to meet in order to be considered proficient in English. WIDA Access is an English proficiency assessment. So if they come in and they come in at a 2.0, they'll have a individualized target each year that's basically an average stair step up to that 4.4. They'll have 5 years to get to that 4.4 from that starting composite score of a 2.0. If they come in at a 3.9, their benchmark is set there at 3.9. They have 5 years to stair step up to that 4.4 composite score. So students get points based on whether or not they meet that annual stair step towards their target. Now, some schools will not have enough ML students. You have to have 20 ML students in order to form a subgroup. So what happens if you don't have a subgroup? Well, these 10 points then get moved to and split between the academic achievement and the progress indicators for the overall rating. And so they rate individual indicators, but these 10 points move to the overall rating in those two areas. The student progress indicator is by far the most complex. It is not straightforward by any means. In fact, it's very difficult to understand. There's 4 targets which students must meet, 4 targets for ELA and 4 targets for math. And so if you think about progress, 50% comes from ELA, 50% comes from math. And then those targets have different weightings in each of those subject areas. So I mentioned these before. There's added value targets, and then there's value added targets. So the added value targets are the median annual target. Think of a median annual target if you're a student across the state of South Carolina in a particular subject area in a particular year. They determine where the cut point is for that 50th percentile, which is a median. Any student achieving above that 50th percentile gets a point. You achieve below that median, you do not get a point, so it's 0. So that's like a 0-1. The added value target sets a customized target based on where you are and where you need to be in order to meet proficiency by 8th grade. And so it's a stretch target. It might be set at the 50th percentile, it might be set at the 80th percentile. So a low-performing student who needs a lot of ground to make up in order to be proficient, they might have a target set at the 70th percentile. So there's a lot more points that a student can get, double-digit points for calculating the report card, if they have a target in which they need to grow more and they grow more. And there's also partial credits they get as well. Value-added target is a bit differently. I won't go into detail, but something to note about the value-added measure is some students count twice. So as you see here in that second bullet under value-added measure, there's lowest quartile students. So students who score at the bottom 20% in any school, and there's always a bottom 20%. Doesn't matter if everyone exceeds expectations, when they rank students based on scale score, there's always a bottom 20%. So those bottom 20% students, they will count towards a percentage for VAM, and then they count again for VAM all students. So there's a lot of incentive to raise the achievement of the lower performing students because they count twice in this system. Something to note, which does make sense, because if you take an assessment this year, you take another assessment based on ELA next year, you're likely not to score the same. And so that's the same. Targets and individual students' target changes by subject area, it changes by grade, and it also changes by year and based on prior performance. I've already mentioned the ELA was not part of 25. The VAM was the only thing scored, and math added value is not going to be part of the 26 report card. For high schools, we moved to cohort maintenance just a few years ago. Used to be this was graduation rate and CCR, but now it's much more than that. Cohort maintenance includes a graduation rate indicator. It also includes CCR, but they've added high school student success indicator. So the high school student success consists of on track to graduate. You have year 1, year 2, and year 3 cohorts, which I'll show you what that looks like, and then the 5-year success rate, which really looks like our former success rate, which we used to calculate. So the graduation rate you're all familiar with. Essentially, it's the total number of students in a 4-year cohort. So once a student enters ninth grade for the first time and they start accumulating credits, they then become part of that 9th grade cohort. And then they have 4 years to graduate plus their senior summer, that 4th year summer. They can also graduate and be part of the graduation rate numerator. So we take the total number of students in the 4-year graduation cohort as the denominator, and the numerator are those students who earn a traditional South Carolina diploma. You can see we can remove a few students. It's a very rigorous process in that we have to have very specific evidence and documentation. We can, some acceptable reasons are to transfer to another diploma granting high school. If they transfer to a school which does not offer a high school diploma, they're counted as a non-graduate. If they immigrate back to another country and we have evidence of that, then we can remove them from the denominator. If they transfer to prison or juvenile facility, or if there is a death, we can remove those with evidence. Something to remember is GEDs and employability credentials do not count as part of the graduation rate. Now, on to high school student success indicator. So this one's fairly new in the sense that this school year for the 26 report card will now count everything. So we have what's called a first year on track to graduate status. These are students who typically you would think of them first year, they're freshmen. At the end of that first year of high school, they must complete and earn 6 credits. 1 is math and 1 is English. If they've done that, then they're considered on track to graduate. And then the same thing applies to that second year on track to graduate. They've earned 12 credits, 2 English, 2 math. Third year on track to graduate, 18 credits, 3 English, 3 math. And then finally, we have the graduation rate, which is a separate indicator. And then we have, for high school student success, the 5-year student success rate. Now, with the 5-year student success rate, they take the prior year's graduating cohort, they keep it static. There's no changing students in or out. They just look at who of that fourth year graduation rate received diplomas, who received a GED, and who received an employability credential. Those now count towards the student success indicator. You should be familiar with college and career readiness, counts 19 points. College and career readiness is based on the fourth grade graduation cohort. Those are the students who count. College ready is listed there on the left, career ready on the right. You can see that for college ready, you can receive a college ready indicator by scoring at least a 20 or higher on the ACT. I've placed the national average of ACT at a 19.4 there for you. Total score of a 1020 on the SAT. The national average is 996. Have an AP exam of 3 or higher. Have a C or higher on any IB exam, or a Cambridge exam, which we don't offer, but we do offer International Baccalaureate or IB, where you score 4 or higher. Complete 6 credit hours in approved dual enrollment courses with a grade of C or higher. Any one of those will indicate that a student is college ready. And on the right side, you can see career ready. Be a CTE completer that earns a national industry credential or state credential, a level 3 credential on the WIN Career Ready Assessment, a 31 or higher on ASVAB, received successful completion of a work-based learning exit evaluation, or receive an employability credential. Like I said earlier, we also, for our schools, 10 points for elementary, middle, 5 points for high school, have a climate indicator. The report card survey has been out for years. They integrated some years back the school report card. This captures students from 3rd grade to 11th grade. Any district and all schools may allow participation with 12th grade students. We do. However, the state EOC, they don't count 12th grade students' results in the report card, so it's only students 3 through 11. And the ones who count also have to be continuously enrolled from the 45th day to the first day of surveying, which generally is in September, sometimes March. And that also applies for all FTE teachers. So we have a student survey, teacher survey. They must be employed or enrolled from the 45th day to the first day of the survey release. For both student and for teacher, our schools have to have an 80% participation rate. If they fail to meet 80% participation rate on either one of those, there are consequences, which generally means their performance is reduced. Sometimes that's reduced a level, but it could be more. Now let's look at the results from the report card. With the release of the report card were many CCR indicators, so I want to share those with you today. For AP or advanced placement, there are 38 possible unique courses offered by College Board's AP. Greenville County Schools offers 32 of those. The score range for an AP test or an AP exam is 1 through 5. 3 and above are typically accepted for earning college credit, but not always. It depends very much on the university and even the college within a university. For example, a Clemson architecture program or the business school at USC, they set their own standards. They may or may not accept any AP. They may accept an AP of 5 or they may accept an AP of 3. So it's very important, and our counselors are good about telling students you need to look at the school, the particular school within the university or college that you wish to enroll in to determine whether your AP credits will count or not. Looking at the results, the AP exams administered in Greenville County Schools increased from 7,200 to over 7,700. The number of students taking AP tests also increased from just over 4,300 to over 4,500. And the passage rate was 73%, higher than the passage rate of 69.2 the prior year, higher than the national passage rate of 70%, slightly lower than the state passage rate of 76%. One reason might be that Greenville County Schools enrolls about 10%. This is district-wide, 10%, and it holds at the high schools as well, of the state's total population. But we represent over 15% of the number of exams given statewide. Moving to SAT. Beginning in March of '24, SAT was administered on digital devices only. So no longer only under special accommodations is it administered via paper pencil. It incorporated computer adaptive technology. It's also a much shorter test, around 2 hours instead of 3 hours. And the SAT results are based, the ones provided in the state's release and in our release are the most recent test scores. They're not super scored. So looking at the results, the number of test takers increased from over 2,800 in '24 to over 3,000 in '25. The total score slightly decreased from 1025 to 1020. The average total score is 24 points higher than the national average total score of 996 and 11 points higher than the state's total score of 1009. So while we did decrease slightly, we remain above both the nation and the state. And recall, in the spring of 2018, students got to choose for college readiness whether they wanted to take the SAT or the ACT. And of course, that's just within the school day setting. There's many opportunities for students to take both the SAT and the ACT outside of the school day setting. So moving to the ACT, ACT has 4 areas in which they test English, math, reading, and scientific reasoning. It's a multiple choice online assessment. And while each section is scored on a 1 to 36 point scale, the composite score is also frequently what we use and what we talk about. It's on a 1 to 36 scale. The number of seniors taking the ACT decreased from 1,770 to 1,591. Notice, though, that SAT increased. So this is saying that more students opted to take the SAT over the ACT. In 2025, the average composite score for Greenville County School seniors was 19.6, slightly down from 19.7. And the subject area test with the highest average score was reading, followed by science, math, and English. Now let's look at the report card ratings. This is a longitudinal view of both Greenville County Schools, our elementary, middle, and high schools. Happy to report that we had 36 excellent report card overall ratings for our schools, 33 good, 16 average, no unsatisfactory, and 2 below average. So that works out to 97.7% of Greenville County schools scoring at excellent, good, or average. It's a 9-point increase from last year. 85% of our students are college career ready. That's a 20-point increase over the last 5 years. And finally, for the first time in district history, the graduation rate has surpassed 90%, reaching 90.6%, an 18-point increase since 2012. I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jason. Ms. Levinas Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. First of all, Jason, kudos to the district, to Dr. Royster, and to everyone with the success that we've experienced this year. When it comes to numbers, I love your brain cells. I'll just put it that way. You're a very intelligent young man. I have a question. In 2016, 2017, the State Board of Education changed the grading scale. And it was, 60 to 69, 70 to et cetera.
Right.
And so, whereas, 60 would be failing. But now those are different. Now it's, an F is 0 to 59. How has this grading scale helped? Because I know the reasons that it was done was to really help in leveling the playing field for our students to compete academic and athletic awards and scholarships. Because of this new grading scale that took place over 10 years ago, and we've progressed like we have, has this benefited our students? And then I'm going to ask you one other question with that. When we have students who come in from, other countries, and they speak very little English, but they start in high school in 9th grade, and they've never been in a classroom, a formal classroom, and they don't graduate on time, does that hurt our graduation rate? So those are two questions that I know you can answer very.
I'll start with the second one first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So yes, any student who enrolls there in PowerSchool, unless there's one of those reasons I mentioned, and we have documentation, paper documentation to go along with that reason, that acceptable reason, then they count in the denominator for our schools. They must graduate still within the 4-year time period according to their 9GR. So they may, if they're a first-time enrolled student, they may, and it also depends on the transcripts, how proficient they are in English as well. So if you're getting a student first time in the U.S. school, 16 years old, weren't even educated in their own home country, which we have students like that in the past, several who have enrolled, then their clock starts ticking. If they bring to us no credits, likely they'll start out as a 9th grade student. They have 4 years to graduate, just like anyone else. If they bring some credits, so it's really individual. If they bring some credits, then they, again, time starts ticking, and they're based on their 9GR cohort of when they have to graduate. So if they don't graduate in 4 years in that summer, then yes, it would count against the school in that case. That was pretty simple and cut and dry. Now for the other one, there's lots of research around grading policies. And frankly, you can find pros and cons on both sides. The state actually is the one who worked with quite a few representatives from around the state. They had counselors, they had superintendents, they had teachers, state representatives. The Education Oversight Committee, I believe, was the group that managed all of that. And the result, they have at least one, maybe 2 reports that are available about the pros and cons and why moving to that system would be good for South Carolina and good for the students. Ultimately, in my opinion, the individual rigor of a classroom, frankly, it doesn't matter if you have rigor in the classroom, if it's standards based, if it's based on the curriculum, and it's going, the difficulty of that classroom is going to determine where those grades fall. You can have the 60 to 100 or the 0 to 100 where a 60 is a passing grade. If it's a difficult course, then, and the grading is difficult, then you may have students who fail. You can have an easy course with a different teacher, same subject area, everyone passes. So there's some differences in the way teachers teach and in the curriculum by subject area as well. Some things that we've done along with that is, of course, credit recovery and content recovery. I think probably one of the biggest reasons people move to the new uniform grading scale is to understand that if a student at the beginning of the year receives a 0 on a test, it's extremely difficult to get enough passing grades, especially passing grades of the C or D, in order to move up to pass. So a one-time fail could literally be dooming for that particular student. So does it benefit? It really depends. It depends on the course. It depends on the curriculum. Depends on the rigor. One thing they did find in that study that I do recall is that most high schools move to a 10-point scale. So the 10-point scale is one thing. The setting of a floor is a bit separate. So the 10-point scale falls in line with most colleges and universities, and it falls in line with preparing them for that type of scale when they're in higher education. But I think you were also asking about the floor. There's different reasons. I don't recall right offhand, but we also did our own study, and we can provide that for you as to the reasons why we made that move.
I know, I'm sure y'all did do studies here because that's what we do. But thank you so much. Appreciate it. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Doolin?
Thank you. I would love to be reminded who had the idea to bring the block schedule to every high school. What department or what team, or is there a specific person that brought that idea?
The charge we gave to high school principals in 2020 was to reach an agreement on what schedule they wanted to operate so they would be consistent throughout the district. That facilitates transportation, that facilitates access to the career centers, that facilitates access to the Fine Arts Center. They got together as a group. They decided, after considerable discussion, that they wanted to all move to the block schedule. That is probably now the predominant schedule utilized throughout the country.
Well, then I'd like to commend all of the high school principals because since they did that, the graduation rate went up almost 6% and the college and career points went up 12% just in those 4 years. So it seems that was a great decision. To improve on our graduation rate further, I wonder what percent of students that receive special education finish with the employability credential, and I guess it's not a traditional diploma, but would be a attendance diploma. Do we know how many students have that?
There are students that I believe, to make sure we understood your question correctly, that get the employability credential, which is recognized by the state. There are some that simply get a recognition that they have completed their IEP goals. Employability credential, Jason, do you recall right offhand the number of students receiving that in percent of the total?
I don't have that right off. Do you have that with you, Tracy?
I don't. I can get it. I can tell you the grad rate went up to 69.9%.
That's the straight out high school diploma grad rate, which did see significant improvement, but we'll get that information and send it to you.
Well, but right now, students that have an employability credential are not counted in the graduation rate?
That is correct, and I think you all, as advocacy.
We're working on that, yeah.
Are working on taking a position that, because our concern with that is, it's a state-recognized credential that the legislature approved, and as you know, and the other board members know, that was a decision for that student to pursue that was made jointly by the school and the parent, related to their capabilities and looking at all aspects of what's most appropriate for that student. So it is very unfortunate that that is not considered in the eyes of the state to having successfully completed their school career.
I agree, and I wonder when that does become law and we can count those students, how much will it improve our graduation rate?
We'll have to send that number to you because it'll go back to the number and percent of our students that attained that this year.
Yep. Just off the top of my head, 30 to 31 students affects the overall district graduation rate 0.6%. But I'll get you those numbers exactly.
So if it was 100 students, oh wait, you said 0.6
Right.
for 30 students? So 50 students would be basically 1 point? And 100 students would be 2 points?
Yeah, it'd be close. Yeah, I can get you that.
How many students every year are getting an employability credential?
That's what I'll have to find out.
We'll send you that. He just doesn't have that as part of his presentation today.
That's another significant opportunity for increase.
It is. It is.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Mosley.
So much. Well, like most of us up here, all of us up here, I am super excited about the numbers that came out. However, I have some very specific questions that I just need to understand better. And then I have a question that's more like a state question, but since we're the largest district in the state and obviously contribute to it, obviously, anytime stuff is published, you're going to continue, you still get criticism, no matter how good news or how much good news there is, you still get criticism. We as a state, and I've served on the board now for 5 years, and I've had a lot of aha moments, and probably all the weeds around the numbers and what counts and what doesn't has been probably one of the biggest aha I've had in terms of how complex it is, the complexity that goes into creating these state report cards, or these school report cards, because if I'm understanding correctly, every single state, so 50 of us, all do this differently.
That's
Meaning
right.
we all have different requirements, we all have different standards. I think I learned last year that the state of California only requires 13, for lack of a better word, Carnegie credits to achieve a diploma, whereas we have 24, is that right?
Right.
For my students to graduate? Okay, so obviously it's not an apples to apples comparison. So what I love, or what I get a little bit frustrated as seeing as a school board, as a public school representative, is folks who like to say, well, we're still 40 whatever in the nation for education. And so I guess my question to you is, do we as a state, because obviously these are set at the state level, and I'm looking at, to Sarah's point, our graduation rate, we don't allow for students who get a certificate of a completion or a GED or this employability credential to be counted. We also, if we lose a student, by definition, if we don't know where they go, it counts against us. Are other states just calculating things differently? I mean, I guess I remember Dr. Royster's presentation, the superintendent's breakfast, where you basically say that the only national comparison that can ever be made with students in education, I believe, is SAT or scores, because that's the national, it's a national test.
Tests are
Right.
SAT,
So-
ACT.
Right.
There is a NAEP test administered. You get no results back at the school level, the district level, or now the state level. They generate a southeastern score. And NAEP does not align necessarily to any state's standards. So it's not valid for comparison purposes for our use. We can't even get the data. So you're left with SAT, ACT. Now, nobody compiles it, but you could look at students earning college credits, but nobody gathers that together. So you got students earning college credits throughout the country through dual credit, AP, IB, what's the other one, Jason?
Cambridge.
Cambridge. You do have that, but no one gathers that. AP gathers AP comparisons from
Right.
school to school, district to district, state to state. But this myth that people continue to perpetuate, that there's some national test and we're not meeting these national standards, that doesn't exist. Now, rankings, people gather rankings in different ways, whether students are perhaps proficient. but for proficiency is defined differently in different states.
Yeah, okay.
Talking about being on grade level, you can look at on grade level. That also is defined differently from state to state. The other thing that's a challenge is, and this would be true, I'm sure, of every state, there are differences among school districts in every state. If one were to accept that South Carolina is in fact 41st in education, that does not mean that the top performing school districts in South Carolina are 41st in education. So I think you all know we rank, if you look at all objective comparisons, we rank number 7 in the state. If you look at all those test scores, everything that you can compare one-to-one, we rank number 7. And I would argue that if you're in the top end of our state, you're providing an education competitive to anywhere in the country. But there is no national test given. The closest thing to that ever happened were years ago, really good school districts would do about every 2 years some sort of nationally normed test. CTBS was one.
Metropolitan.
Iowa test of basic skill. They were nationally normed. So districts about every other year, starting in maybe the 3rd, 4th grade, they would administer that to all their students. And it would truly give you a national comparison based on all the other school districts in the country that gave that test. Nothing like that exists anymore. Well, it still exists, but people don't do that because we already spend too much time testing. Because the more we test, the less time we're instructing, which affects the outcome on the test. And now we're required to do multiple benchmarks by the state, which does help inform instruction, but I doubt we would choose to do as many as are done, nor under the same testing administration standards that exist if the state didn't require that. So it really is, there's this myth that there's some national place you can go to and every school district will be objectively ranked on the same standards in the country, and you can truly say that your school district is number 123rd out of 14,000 school districts in the country. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does. I think it's just more of a statement that needs to be made because it's very difficult to communicate to other folks who don't live in the weeds the rest of us live in. And I don't even live in the weeds that Dr. McCreary tries to take us into, to explain that it's just not apples to apples, and there are reasons to celebrate, and there are reasons to be proud of all that we've achieved. And while there's always opportunity for improvements and stuff, that there's just so much complexity that goes into creating these scores and rankings and evaluations and accountability measures and all of that. And so I just felt like it was worth being said. However, I need one more point of clarification. Do our charter schools, private schools, held to these same accountability measures? And the reason I'm asking that is because I have 2 kids that went through a charter school briefly in their middle school career. That school, I'll be honest, didn't have to worry about multilingual learners, didn't have to worry about some of these accountability factors maybe that go into this measurement. So that's why I'm asking.
Private schools the state has no authority, and there are no accountability metrics by which private schools have to meet. So that's completely off the table. There's nothing that's associated with what I spoke about related to private schose.
Okay.
Public charter schools, yes. Public charter schools, and there's 3 in the state. Those schools will get report cards.
Okay. All right, thank you.
When Dr. McCreary said 3, he was referencing there are 3 charter school authorizers. There's
That's right.
the state public charter school district. There's the Charter Institute at Erskine, and there is the one that was at Limestone that's now temporarily housed in the State Department, I believe, but continuing to operate though Limestone College shut down. And if you can go on the state SDE website and like pull up our district, see all our school report cards. You can do the same for each of those charter districts and see each school's report card. So they are judged with the same test criteria. To your point, I think more to your other point, every student that's there is there by choice, just like 14% of our students are attending a school other than the one they're zoned to. They're choosing to attend somewhere else. So it is by choice, and it requires, with the exception of, I believe, 2 locally, it requires they provide their own transportation there as well. I believe Legacy and seem like one other
Lead.
provide transportation. So it is different. And then if you're not being successful there, you have the option to go enroll in your local public school. So a little bit different, but they're held to the same academic standards.
Okay.
And then there are regulations that do not apply to them that apply to us.
Okay. Now, this gets into the weeds a little bit, but I want to make sure I understood you. When you talked about the value add versus the
Added value.
added value, I don't know, I can't remember which one it is, but you said something about ELA was not factored in, and now it's going to be math. Is that correct?
That's
Did I
right.
understand that correctly?
That's
So
right.
does that skew our results? I mean, and not just ours, but the whole state, because obviously that applies to everyone, correct? I mean, in other
Correct.
words, next
That's
year,
right.
will we, if we had a school that really did well, but maybe next year doesn't post as good numbers, but could that be the reason why that might happen?
It's, well, it certainly would be the reason in progress. And it's all based on how the Education Oversight Committee will set math standards, those cut scores, this late spring, early summer.
Okay.
It might too be worth to mention, Jason, I don't think you mentioned this in your presentation, how the report card's calculated may start out one way at the beginning of a year, and it may change between the time you've begun that academic year and the report card is issued.
That's right. Just like with the SAT score, it changed after school started.
Okay. So, all right, I'll just stay tuned for those numbers because I'm not even going to get any more into that weed. These are random questions. The climate indicator, it said it required an 80% participation,
Right.
or we get dinged on that?
Right.
So do our schools meet that 80%?
They do. They have various ways to track individual student information and teachers.
Okay. I was just making sure because that seems rather ambitious, and I was pretty impressed that I feel like we send out surveys and we don't get a good return rate a lot of times, so that's why I was asking. Okay, and then can you tell me why, and I don't know if this is a question for you or Ms. Hogan, but why is there not criteria at our state level against which schools like Washington Center are measured? Like, I know that's a special school, but, or CDC, even the CDC, at the CDC level, since we have so many child development centers, and obviously early intervention is a big deal. So why do we not have criteria that we're held accountable for those types of schools? Is that just a state thing where they've just decided to not?
No, I'll start, and then if Ms. Hogan
Sorry.
wants to complete it. So the federal government's the one who ultimately decides with ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, which is a reauthorization of No Child Left Behind, NESEA from the 60s. So with that reauthorization, they establish the federal criteria, sort of the overarching rules for all states to follow. States then create their own sub-level criteria within those overarching rules by which they want to play, and then the federal government either approves or disapproves. For example, with the graduation rate, Louisiana some years back had at least two types of diplomas. One was a CTE type technical diploma and a regular high school diploma. They were allowed to count both of those diplomas, one being a lesser diploma. They were allowed to count those because the federal agency gave them the approval to do that. The federal government and their regulations have been clear, most recently, that only a traditional high school diploma, whatever the state calls that, you can literally have a state which has 10 credits, which are required for a high school diploma. If that's what the state says their high school diploma level is, then that's their high school diploma. But the standard set by the federal government has been a traditional high school diploma set on the grounds and the rules by individual states. That is the mark by which students have to meet in order to count towards graduation.
And I think there are also, Jason, if I remember correctly, there are a number of states that do not offer any pre-K.
That's right. That's correct.
They have no 4-year-old programs, no 3-year-old programs, other than those required to serve students with disabilities. In South Carolina, there is no compulsion to offer 4-year-old programs for regular ed students. And in fact, we only get, Robin, about $2 million in state funding to support 4K programs. And we're serving right at 2,000 4-year-old students. So that, I think those two reasons may be the reason there is no accountability or report card inclusion for those students. And then at the elementary level, even for our students in the elementary schools, which do generate a report card, the amount that actual student achievement in early grades contributes to that report card is not included while they're in those grades. Now, obviously, it dramatically affects what they do when they hit the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. The comparison to Washington Center, I think there's only 2 in the state, ours being one, and there's one operated in Spartanburg, that are similar. Now, obviously, there are students with those needs in other districts, but they're served in a multitude of ways, and Ms. Hogan can probably speak to that. And I believe she can also tell you how many of those credential students there are this year. So, Ms. Hogan, if you want to speak to those two things.
Yes, sir. I think
Tracy, if I could, I'm sorry, before we move any further, I've got like 1 minute left, so without objection, we're going to extend for 20 minutes. Go ahead, Ms. Hogan.
No, everything Dr. Royster and Dr. McCreary said, I would echo, Ms. Mosley. And we are very fortunate to have Washington Center, but he's exactly right. The only thing that mirrors that or is close to it is the one in Spartanburg, the McCarthy Tesler Center. And so those students that are in other districts either are served through some memorandum with another county where they go to that county, or at home or in a base school. So it would be really hard to delineate that. The question earlier, I believe, Ms. Doolin, which was yours about the employability credential, this past year we had 74 employability credentials that we issued, which comes to 1.3% of our total graduation population, which would have taken our graduation rate up to 91.9% if we were able to count it.
Thank you so much. Okay, I have one more question, and I just need clarification on this. Hold on, I'm trying to find the slide that it's on. It has to do with that 5-year student success rate.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, I didn't follow along. So is this a new measurement, a standard or measurement? I don't even know what the right word is. Or because it says that includes the GED and the employability credential, but we also said those don't count in the graduation rate. So that's what I'm just trying to make sure I understand what that means.
So the major difference is between these two slides. We have a graduation rate that only accepts students or includes students who first time enrolled in ninth grade, 4 years later, they're the cohort that graduates. The high school student success, 5-year student success rate takes the 4-year graduation cohort from the previous year. It looks at them, where are they in the 5th year? For those who did not graduate, did they get a high school diploma? Because the 5-year student success rate is a South Carolina component. The federal government has no rulings or issuance regarding 5th-year success, 6th-year success, etc. They do it around graduation rate. So these are South Carolina indicators that are incorporated into our report card that have been approved. So that 5th-year success rate, think about it as a graduation rate. We can't call it a graduation rate or else the feds would have something to say. So it's a success rate. So the 5th-year success rate includes high school diplomas, includes GEDs, and employability credentials.
So it
Doesn't factor into that overall report card rating.
And it does factor into the rating under
What
the
degree?
student success. All of these, there's a complex algorithm that's used, but all of these bullets, all 4 of them, for this coming 26 report card, will be integrated to determine did a school receive 10 out of 12 points, 8 out of 12 points, etc. They do count in part for that 12 points.
Inside that student success rate icon,
Yes,
when you put a report card up there,
That's
it's got a row, it's got like 3 rows of icons. Inside that, it counts,
right.
but not in the grad rate.
Not in the grad rate at all.
So it gives us credit in the report card, but not in the grad rate
Correct.
for right now.
Right.
So Chuck, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask this. So are we advocating that our advocacy committee is hoping to affect change to where it will count in the grad rate? Is that correct?
Correct. It has
Okay.
to be a decision, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong. It has to be a decision made by the Education Oversight Committee.
Okay.
We have had conversations with members of the Greenville delegation, and they will weigh in officially at the legislative level after our resolution passes in December at the State Association.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much for your patience. I appreciate your time and the presentation and all the information, and, oh, it's a lot. Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you. Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell.
Thank you, Dr. McQuarrie. You and your department have the expertise, and y'all bring it to us so that we can understand this complex and confusing directives. Now, the report card is, came from the Education Oversight Committee, correct?
The states.
Were they the ones
yes,
that
under
put
the
it
rules
in?
of the federal ESSA.
You know, I've never been a fan of the Education Oversight Committee because of a lot of the things that they put in here, but
It's actually calculated and produced by the State Department of Education based
Right.
on
Oh.
the Education Oversight Commission's directions.
right. So it came from the Education Oversight Committee. With Ms. Mosley, she hit on a lot of the things that I had written down about the GED and the employability diploma not being counted in one instance, but counted in another. But I have a question on the SAT scores going up. Did the Education Oversight Committee give a reason for increasing that? Because the national average is 996. And it was 1020, and now it's going to 1040. Did they give a reason why they increased that?
Most of the time, I don't rely on my recollection, and I would like to get that information to you later.
Always the diplomat.
But I will have to say,
A lot of the stuff you said, I understood, but some of it is just confusing. This report card has always been confusing.
right. I'm
And-
almost certain that they made that leap because the College Board produced their own research report for college readiness. And in that report, they probably indicated that that higher score was indicative of more success after the first year GPA or first year of college experience.
Really? Okay. What is the super scoring under that SAT? I saw that on one of the slides. What
So in
is
years
super
past,
scoring?
the state accepted super scoring and would report off of super scoring. That's where if a student takes the SAT 3 times, there's various subscores, the reading and math subscores. And so if they take it 3 times, they have different subscores. A super score would take the highest of those 3, would take the highest reading score, and then it would also take the highest math score, combine those to have a super score composite. That's not what's reported anymore. It is the highest overall score out of the 3 scores. So it's the highest composite score from 3 different sessions.
Still confusing, but who came up with this, like Ms. Mosley said, added value and value added? The difference between those, for real?
So value added's been around for 30 years. Different companies have different, you can think of it as a black box. It's proprietary calculations. So a lot of times we don't know how it's going to be calculated. Tennessee for decades have had value added through the SAS Institute in North Carolina. And I think his last name was Williams. He created that one. The VAM, value added measure, metrics that we use, the calculations from Education Analytics. I've seen a lot of VAM models. I think Education Analytics did it right. I like their model. One way to think about VAM, and I may have told you this before, is when you look at a hurricane in the Atlantic and you see all of these spaghetti models, every one of those models is essentially a separate VAM model. So all these vendors out there from Europe, Australia, multiple vendors in the United States, they have their own calculation to determine where that hurricane's going to go. And so ultimately you get all these fingerlings of something, and then, they put, artificially, they just put a single line right in the middle, or they choose a VAM that's traditionally had success. Well, whether you're talking about a student, a teacher, a school, VAM produces scores and then a likelihood of where a student falls. And so, again, think about a VAM score like those spaghetti models in the sense that there's a lot of different vendors out there, and we just work with Education Analytics.
Well, I just wanted to put in my 2 cents about, like I said, I've never been a fan of the Education Oversight Committee because with Dr. Royster, when it was created for what purpose? Because it's not in the purpose that it was created back, 20 years ago or something like that. Does anybody, that's what I remember it being.
It's been around for more than 20 years. Jason, probably 25,
I think they were around
30 years.
Around 1998
No.
with the inception of accountability.
And the state
Come on,
report
Jay,
card
it's
started
dangerous to do
when?
this just off of recollection. Was the desire of the legislature at that time to create a oversight body appointed by them to oversee K-12 education in the state. There are people that argued at the time, well, that's duplicative because there already exists a state board of education
Right.
whose members are appointed by the legislature. One represents each judicial circuit in the state. Then there's a governor's appointee and a couple other seats on there. So, well, there was argument made at the time that this is duplication. But that was the compelling reason, as I recall, that it was created.
So it's supposed to be an oversight, but they basically tell the State Department what to do as far as.
Well, they have become the creators of accountability.
But that was not what they were,
So,
their purpose was
and in
at
fact,
first, but
if
anyway.
if I recall correctly, South Carolina was one of the first states to have a statewide accountability testing system, which goes back to 1983, 82, 83, somewhere along in there, which was the basic skills assessment program.
I applaud you and your staff and the whole district for being able to bring this to us where we can, you can put it in layman's terms. But I wanted to go on my little soapbox about the Education Oversight Committee because I just don't agree with what they do.
Well, thank you, and let me take a moment to thank my team. They work hard to help the schools do what they do, particularly two people. Kenyatta Smith's no longer in the department. Angela Abercrombie's here. They do a ton of work to support the schools in their efforts to make it easier for them.
Thank you. That's all.
Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. Going back for a minute to the On Track to Graduate, since that is now just not going to be reported, but going to be counted, by adding that in, where are those points coming from? So what percentages are being taken out to put that in?
So it's a good question. I probably wasn't clear on this, but for the high school student success indicator, it's counted. So it's been grandfathered in. So the first year, for example, 2 years ago was the first year we had the first year on track to graduate. It counted. And then last year it was both the first year on track to graduate and the second year on track to graduate. And now this school year, we're going to have all three, the first year, the second year, and the third year count. And so it's counted a little bit at a time for those 12 points, and there's no specific percentage. I can't tell you that the first year on track to graduate is weighted 25% of the 12 points, or you get 4 points for that first year on track to graduate. They have a calculation in the accountability manual, and I can show you what that is and give that to you, but all of these things in combination, once they're calculated, comes out to determining how many points out of 12 points a school receives. But they all count some.
Going back to Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell's statement a minute ago, when these decisions are made like this, just for example, to start counting the on track to graduate, do the school districts have any input into those changes being made, or are those just mostly being top-down decisions that are coming down to us from the state?
That's a good point. I was not made aware that a decision change was even being processed. I don't know of anyone in Greenville County Schools who was made aware. Similarly, during COVID, the Education Oversight Committee made a change to incorporate the two added value measures, which was MAT and AVT. Those came primarily, from what I understand, out of research and usage in Colorado. I'm not sure if Colorado still uses those measures, but that came directly from the Education Oversight Committee. And whenever it was presented by an Education Oversight Committee representative at a testing and accountability roundtable, it was essentially done. The decision had been made, and even though people voiced concerns around some of the issues, it was clear that the horse had left the corral at the stable, and it was basically there. That person was there just to show us what will be done.
Public input into their decisions has been inconsistent at best.
Prior years, under prior executive directors, we had more input. As a matter of fact, they would seek out input from one of the largest districts, because a large district's unlike a very small district, and the way we would go about implementing the impact certain decisions would have on schools, on districts, on students. And so Dr. Royster is correct. It's changed over time, and most recently, the input's been, the ask or request for input has been light regarding accountability.
It definitely seems like a very disappointing state of affairs that those folks, I'm sure some of them have on the Oversight Committee, have education backgrounds, but considering that each school district in the state, of course, the people employed and at the district level many have spent their lives in education, it does seem like that the state would be very interested in the input coming from the districts. So that's very disappointing, but thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Sailors.
Yet again, we've got maybe 2 minutes left, so I'm going to extend this time without objection for 30 minutes. We have at least 3 more speakers, starting with Dr. Stiles.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors, and I just want to say, Mr. Cochran, I echo your thoughts. Thank you for sharing that. My interest in particular, Mr. McCrary, is the school climate indicator, because we know that a school climate is the foundation for success, academic success. You mentioned that the parents and the students, they have to have a certain participation rate. Are they also surveyed for their report card? Has that ended?
Parents are surveyed. The survey, there are certain items which are reported, but parent surveys do not count towards points for the report card.
What I was interested in. And on the report card, do they report just specific questions to the public? What is reported out on the school report card in regard to climate?
You're correct. There are 3 specific items from the report card that are reported for teachers, parents, and students. They do not report. We get item by item analysis, and we send those to schools to analyze, but we do not, they do not report on the report card every item.
And I noticed that the elementary and middle schools, that counts for 10 points, and the high schools, only 5 points. That's quite a variance there. Do you understand why the difference in points for elementary and middle and high school?
No, I couldn't recall
Okay.
why that differs.
And my last question, I guess, Dr. Royster, this is a question for you. If the climate becomes an area that maybe is not as positive as we would like on the school report card, what do we do to support our principals or leaders who may be struggling with that? And I know that, do we have PD? What do we do specifically?
It depends on,
Have a need.
it depends on the circumstance of each school. You'll recall we do upbeat surveys with all of our faculty, and now we're doing that we're including staff in that. That gives us far better information about the internal workings of the school than the report card information does. But the report card information would also give you another point to address. So depending on what answers reveal weaknesses or opportunities for improvement, then that would fall to the assistant superintendent supervising that particular school to work with academics, to work with other areas within the district to seek out opportunities for development for that principal, if that's what's necessary, or some sort of staff development for the faculty in that school. It would be very customized to what exactly is determined to be the issue or the problem.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Royster, and that's my question. That concludes my question, Mr. Sailors.
Ma'am. Dr. Presley.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. So I've got two questions that all kind of tie to assessment. One is a quick just statement to kind of frame it. Dr. McCreary, unless things have changed drastically in the past couple of years, assessment in our state is created by entities testing companies that do what? Like, what does that look like to assess a particular subject area?
We have a vendor, DRC. They work with State Department representatives to create item banks. The item bank, you can think of it as a big 3-ring binder. They get representatives from that subject area from across the state, teachers, of course, State Department folks, psychometricians, there and there. And then if you're talking about cut scores, they use a bootstrapping technique where from all of these experts, they say, okay, take a bookmark and place where you think the items change from does not meet to approaches. Take another bookmark and items change from the difficulty of the items and the rigor of the items change from approaches to meets, and then from meets to exceeds. And so they go through an iterative process to ultimately define what that looks like. Then the vendor goes back and analyzes the data, comes back and creates percentages of our students based on what this group said the cut score should be, and then they may change those cut scores, they may smooth them, and I've talked about this before, and this is something Ms. Mosley brought up. There is no other test like SC Ready in the entire United States. It's very specific to us. It was created for us, and so it's limited in comparison, but yet it does provide criteria for our standards. The way the vendor and the EOC set those standards means everything. For example, some years ago, I went to a district and I talked to them about their standards and their assessment and why most of their schools, including their high poverty Title I schools, were achieving 90% proficiency in their state given their standards. Well, as I dug into the psychometrics and the technical aspects of their assessment, it was an easy test. And so that's a challenge of proficiency. That's a challenge across states where if you set a bar low, if you set that standard low where 90% of schools, 90% of students can pass, you're not doing yourself a big favor in doing that, although you're going to look great. Your report cards will look great. The state report card will look great. South Carolina has not done that. As a matter of fact, in ELA, our standards for both ELA and math for cut score of meets is set at a high bar. As a matter of fact, it's above average, especially in mathematics. And so if our students are meeting the proficiency, the meets expectations, they are considered college ready. And they would be considered above average. So the expectation in South Carolina, I'm using math as the example, is that if you're at proficiency, you are above average. So have to take that into consideration.
Thank you, Dr. McCreary. So with assessment, those each item in that assessment bank, is there a price tag attached to those items?
There is. It's several $1,000s per item.
Thank you.
And it's varied over the years.
Right. So when new standards iterations are being brought in, and that assessment item analysis takes place, Is there ever any push to retain some of the existing assessment items, possibly for the sake of cost effectiveness?
Absolutely.
Okay. So with assessment, and let's not let that like escape us, it's a big business just like everything else. And unfortunately, it creates the need for some things that fly in the face of our best practices that we put forward as a state, as a nation, everything else, tied to critical thinkers, tied to rich, engaging learning opportunities, and the list goes on and on. Assessment can truncate units of instruction. It can take time away from in-depth exploration, as I already talked about. It can impact the DOK level of any type of learning opportunity for students. So just ballpark, take an assessment like, I don't know, social studies, EOC, US history. What's the percentage of DOK 1, 2, 3, or 4? Do you know that from the blueprint, just off the top of your head? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Off the top of my head, I don't, but I can get it very easily.
2s and 3s, you said?
Oh, 2s and 3s? Don't hold me to this, but I would say 65 to 75% at least.
I'd like to know the breakdown with the
I can
3s
get
too,
you
because
that.
as we go higher, we aim for 3 and 4. 4 being unaccessible, correct? We don't assess at DOK level
Typically,
4.
it's too expensive to assess level 4 because you're producing something.
Perfect. All right. So what that creates is time away from that in-depth because we're running to cover, which is a bad word. Covering has nothing to do with student mastery. All of this learning in hopes that they can perform. Additionally, it downplays less tested or non-tested content areas to include science, social studies, fine arts, physical education, health, world language, all of those, because those are the rules of the game. So my whole reason for asking you this is to illuminate another kudos to you guys. This is wonderful, these historic these test scores this time, but the true accolades should also fall with the fact that the district has continued to provide rich learning opportunities for our students despite what we're having to function within. And I want to thank every one of you and every single teacher and administrator and everyone else in this district who is doing this and doing the additional. Because that's a big deal. And we just need to remain vigilant about that and ask all of those questions and support y'all as we move forward. The second question deals with the 4x4 or the block schedule. And we know the pros, the standardization of schedules across the district, 8 opportunities for success as opposed to 6 or 7, 4 opportunities for a fresh start. I look back on my academic trajectory. I needed some fresh starts from time to time. One of the cons, however, has to do with the AP testing windows. Go back to the College Board question or assessment, the big business of assessment, what you've already shared about item banks. Do we have any data on students who take, because currently we've got students who are taking AP courses in the fall, and they're not AP testing until then. Now, that is not on y'all, because that's when the College Board expects that testing to happen. Have we done any study of the success rates for students who take it right at the end of a course as opposed to the students who are having to wait until the end of a particular academic year after they finished in December?
Well, two pieces of that. Number one, it is extremely unfortunate that the College Board still only tests only in May, but yet they're holding students, like you said, who mostly throughout high schools in the United States are likely in a block, an A, B of some sort, so they have to wait until the end of the year. And we do have processes in place to continue the spiral, to refresh and to cover that material throughout the spring with those students who end the course in December. When it comes to your second question, which, remind me again.
Have we looked at
Have we
a
looked at it?
side-by-side of success?
We look at AP success. We look from both bookmarks. We look for AP potential, and we look at AP success. I don't know recently that we've covered looking at the success. I know we have some outcomes from students who go through our preparation days, but do you have anything specific on that?
I don't have specific numbers, but that's something that we can pull. We're actually doubling the size of our AP review day this year because of student request and participation. But we can certainly look at those numbers.
Okay.
I think arguably the 4x4 has become the predominant high school schedule in the country. As we talked with we were at a meeting, the large countywide schools consortium two weeks ago. And that's a predominant model they're using. And you talk to people throughout the country, it seems to be the case. And it's a shame that the AP testing, the College Board, won't recognize that. They don't want to incur the expense, I guess, of redoing the test a second time during the year, having to create a second test. And that's not serving students. Now, I think we're, given the set of circumstances we have, I believe we're doing a very effective job in our schools serving students to help them prepare for that spring test when they had the class in the fall. But that takes their time, that takes teacher time, that could be spent in the pursuit of something new and not going back over something, because there's anybody that stays away from some subject for 3-4 months and doesn't continually engage in going over that and practicing its use, they're not going to do as well as if they just took the class. I mean, that's common sense, if nothing else. And it's unfortunate that they are no more user-friendly to their customer, the student, than they are.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. And that kind of folds in my last question. How or what are ways, and this conversation can continue, can your trustees, in conjunction with Dr. Royster, advocate at state, national levels, which is what we should be doing for change or for a closer look at this? Don't have to answer that now, but that was my whole point in this, to provide that kind of leveler playing field for our students who are taking these tests, and that they should be able to take them in real time. Thank you so much.
Right. Ms. Middleton.
Thank you, Jason. Really good job on trying to explain something that is, in my mind, convoluted. I don't know if it's the Department of State and all these testings they put out. I remember we talked a while back about the end of course test, and some of the things, like say in history, that stands in my mind, where just very, very low scores all the time, especially in the middle school or elementary school, or must have been high school. Is that when the end is it done in high school then?
Right.
But we had some low scores, like 30s and 35, and then we're celebrating when we get to 40 or something. But is there any move to work with the state, and maybe we've talked about this before, to try to get these tests a little bit more amenable to the general population in our state, so that we can have more normal type of scores in some of these tests, you know, like 60s or 70s or 80s, or, do you know, I'm probably not being clear.
Well, this year we had really good success on end of course exams. There have been exams that traditionally have been difficult. U.S. history is one. And U.S. history is a good example because it spans the body of the United States history, which is quite a long time. So it's difficult to prepare students to be able to master all of the potential material that they'll be faced with on that test. So if, and none of us, it's called content reliability, where none of us wants to take a test that we haven't been prepared for, and during the preparation, we haven't been exposed to the information, and we haven't been exposed to experiences where we can master that information. So we do a very good job, I think, in academics with helping prepare teachers to cover the material. Even though it can be a lot of material, the standards can be somewhat ambiguous, unpacking those standards, providing the support necessary, and helping them with assessments as well in preparation of the end of course assessment. So we have that foundation. We do have rigorous, the state has set up rigorous cut scores for EOC. It would be, I think, better supporting our students if we, the state produced some type of power standards and gave us an indication of all of these standards to be tested, which ones might be. Otherwise, folks could prepare and not be exposed to items which are on the assessment. They may have covered that months ago. So we do what we have to do to make sure that the teachers are prepared and have the resources. They prepare the students. But essentially, you're down to what Ms. Presley talked about, and that is a lot of times outcomes aren't necessarily associated with what you might think is proficiency, because proficiency is defined differently, could be by every assessment, by every state. And so then it becomes a perception of what is realistic and what can we live with. But we do know that the EOCs are rigorous assessments, and I think we're doing our part to prepare teachers and students for those assessments.
I don't doubt that we're doing our part. I just can't imagine what it's like in the smaller districts where they don't have the staff and they don't have as much resources to really do some of these state tests.
Right.
And I just wish the state was a little bit more receptive to, putting out a more realistic test, or at least kind of telling the district a little bit more, okay, this is the area we're going to be testing on, because I don't think it's realistic that the kids are going to be able to comprehend and know all of that. And I think the scores just generally do reflect that, even though they may improve a little bit, but they're still reflective of just kind of an impossible situation. So I don't know if it's the vendors or the school or the state system or
It would be
what?
a state system to more standardized, but just simply produce more supports for districts.
Exactly. Thank you. I just wanted to bring that up again. I thought we were going to do something with that. Chuck, maybe I could ask you that maybe for the advocacy to go to the state and ask them if they could do more in that area to help the district.
We'll be more than happy to put that on our agenda. We just have to eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Do appreciate that. And the last thing I have is the climate survey. That sounds sort of nuanced. Does the climate survey go to the parents also? So it's part of the report card, so how would that factor in?
So there are 3 participants. There are students who participate in the climate survey in grades 3 through 12. Only grades 3 through 11 actually are scored and count towards the climate indicator. And teachers are surveyed. Their participation and outcomes on the survey are also scored and count in part towards the report card. Parents, they're the 3rd group who are surveyed. Their scores are only reported. The 3 items are reported, but nothing from the parent survey is scored and counts toward the overall rating of schools.
Okay, but the climate survey, like say there was a poor climate survey for a high school, and that would go to, the parents would see that, like, the kids I don't know, there's a reason why I guess the kids aren't doing good or something there. Maybe there's something wrong. That sounds sort of negative. Would that be a negative thing? Like they would think the schools are,
Well, I think with.
but I'm not sure
Sure.
what the climate survey is even, why we have it.
Schools get into detail analyzing all of the indicators, and if we're talking about the school climate survey, a lot of times these discussions are with SICs. They can also be with other parent groups, potentially bringing this up with PTA, so and different advisory groups as well. So yes, the schools, principals, administrative teams, very aware of all of these indicators, working diligently wherever you might see a school fall down if it is or not perform as greatly as they should be performing. I can guarantee you they're working on strategies, building plans internally with their principal supervisor and with their community, at least representatives of their community, typically the SIC as well, to put that plan in action and bring up those particular indicators, like school climate.
Well, it's good that they're completing those surveys, so thank you. It was a great presentation. Really,
you.
a lot of work, I know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton. Jason, one quick question before we move on to the next item. Following up on one thing that Ms. Mosley brought up, let's talk SATs and ACTs. In South Carolina, it's my understanding that any student that cares to take either one of those two assessments, they're open to do that.
Right.
Whether they're a straight A student or one that's having some challenges.
Schools have to provide an opportunity for students and the parents to choose between the SAT or the ACT in the 11th grade, typically 11th grade.
And in other states, that's not necessarily the case. For example, I believe I'm correct, in Arizona, they only encourage the top 2 percentile to take those tests.
Policy is reflected and participation completely differs by state and even by district.
Yet we're still outpacing the United States. Thank you very much. That concludes item number 401. We'll now move to item 4.02, the Elevate Incentive Program update. Again, Dr. McCrary will be presenting on this. It is also for information only. Dr. Royster, do you have anything?
I'll turn it directly over to Dr. McCreary, and he can continue down that path that he has already lit out on.
Some more water, Jason. You okay?
I appreciate it. Yeah, I could use another bottle if somebody wants to.
You're giving us an example of what a filibuster looks like.
How about we get you a bottle of water when you get through talking? Would that spur you to move through it more quickly?
Aaron's getting.
They're going to get him one.
I got it.
Cocktail, anything would be okay.
What, a cocktail speed things up? Okay.
So I'm going to make this one quicker unless
Go
you
right
have
ahead. Y'all listen up, please. Go ahead.
October 2023 was the first presentation. You approved the Elevate model, so I'm going over a lot of that information. A little bit of the outcomes, a lot about the model. I'm not going to talk about the entirety of the ins and outs of Elevate. I'm very specifically going to be talking about the model itself. So the primary focus of Elevate is to move student achievement. It's to increase student achievement in the schools which are identified as Elevate and facilitate students' highest possible achievement. Secondarily, if a school is on the list, it's to get them off the list. If they're not on the list, it's to keep them off the list. Those are the purposes of Elevate. Now, again, there's lots of goals. I'm not going to discuss each of these, and probably don't know a lot of the actions that's being taken because HR is doing things, academics are doing things. I'm going to focus on the raising overall achievement and getting out of or staying off of state designations. Let's first start with compensation. Teacher eligibility for compensation includes working a full year contract of 190 days, attendance of 96% or greater, participate fully if they want full compensation in professional development that occurs specifically at the beginning of the year, and providing evidence of highly effective teaching. And what I'm going to be talking about mostly is they meet high growth overall in ELA and mathematics, and also through VAM, and they also meet expectations in grade 3 and in science testing. So when we look at the compensation model, you can see the one that's highlighted there. You can see the employees class on the left, various positions, and you can see all of those additions that are added to the base salary. So regardless of performance, thank you, whether it's teacher or school performance, employees will be paid that addition to the base salary. You can see the column 1, the absolute addition, the PD addition, the bilingual addition, and the ML certified addition. Each of those totals up to, just for those, a maximum of $5,000 for tested teacher, $5,000 for certified non-tested, $2,500 instructional aides, $1,000 non-certified instructional, $6,000 principal, and $4,000 administrators, AAAPs. So that's without even looking at, so these roles and positions will be paid, may be paid this amount, regardless if they meet what I'm about to talk about, either the teacher or the school goal. So looking at the school goal and teacher goal, there's various payment compensation plans here. So with the school performance goal, you see all of the different positions, employees within the school that contribute to that overall school goal. And they're incentivized to help the school rise in achievement. And then there are individual teacher growth goals. Those are specific to tested teachers, which I'll talk about. So the maximum, just for tested teachers, you can see the maximum total compensation. But if they get the addition to the base salary, the school achieves the target, they meet their goal, and the individual teacher who's tested meets his or her goal, the maximum compensation is $12,500. So I won't read all of these, but again, this shouldn't be new information, as in a lot of different forums across a lot of different people, from inception, multiple recruiting events, multiple events after hire and during hire with the principal, Dr. McDavid, and during professional development and trainings, and throughout and over the past year and a half, have communicated, even to communities, the Elevate model. So first, let's look at the school performance goal. The school performance goal is fairly simple. I didn't create the metrics behind the school performance goal. It's related specifically to accountability from the report card. There's 3 indicators. You have to meet, a school has to meet a state report card overall indicator, so the overall rating has to be average or above, and the achievement rating has to be average or above, and the progress rating has to be average or above. All 3 have to be average or above. They could be all be good. They could be excellent, average, average, but they must be at least average or above on all 3 indicators. Now, when this was initially set, I was looking at the most recent data when setting this particular indicator, and it was set both for elementary schools and middle schools at essentially the 50th percentile, meaning that 50% of all schools in the state of South Carolina met these indicators. We had some high poverty schools in the state and even in the district that met. The 2 Elevate schools at the time did not meet these. So that was our starting point for the school goals. I went over this in the last presentation, but the overall rating comes from all of the indicators, the academic progress, preparing for success, climate, ML progress, all of those establish the overall rating. And then academic achievement rating. I told you that was the simplest to communicate and understand. The higher student scores, the more points they get. And then for progress, we went over this, it's a matter of, okay, students may not be where they need to be, but are students progressing to hit that target? And all of these speak to moving students forward. Again, just as a reminder, the median annual target MAT, it cuts a state in half and says, did you achieve at the median or above? If you did, you get a point. The added value target says, I scored here, which may be pretty low for a grade level in a particular year for a subject area. So if I scored here, then I've got to be at my target's at the 70th percentile because I've got to meets expectations. So I've got a long way to go. So if I reach that 70th percentile, that's tremendous growth. I'm going to get tremendous points. But if I don't reach it, I'm still going to get many points. So that's AVT. And then finally, value added measure, which I'm going to show you visually a conceptual model of what that looks like. Again, targets may and do change based on the subject area, grade, year, and prior performance. Like I said, it makes sense, though. If you take a test now, you're probably going to score a little bit differently and have a little bit different target next year, or maybe 10 or 15 days from now. So looking at, I'm still talking about the school goal. This is Alexander and Lakeview's results. Let's see if I can get this to work. You can't see it too well. But again, there were 3 indicators. The overall rating, Alexander had excellent. The achievement rating, Alexander was at average. And then student progress, Alexander was at excellent. So for that school, it met the school goal, and they'll be compensated for doing so. For Lakeview, they had an overall rating, which was average, academic achievement rating below average, and a student progress of good. They did a lot of good. Their ELA and their math all went up. It went up significantly. But as you see, for academic achievement, and again, the goal of Elevate is to increase academic achievement to a level that sustains not being on any of the state's list and to maximize every student's academic potential. So they're getting there, they just weren't there this year. They had to meet all 3, and they met 2 of the 3. But kudos to the work they did do. Now that's the school goal. So compartmentalize what I just said, and now I'm moving to the teacher goal. This is only applicable to teachers who are tested. So there's 2 types of teachers who are tested. There are teachers who teach students in grades 4 through 8 in ELA and math. That's what I'm going to talk about first. And then a little bit later, I'm going to talk about teachers who test students in grade 3 and those who test students in science in grades 4 and 6, which is separate. The methodology is completely separate. So let's start with teachers in grades 4 through 8 who teach ELA and or math. The measure or the target by which they want to hit is 3.67, which I'll explain that. That's essentially the 75th percentile. So they're growing students because these schools previously performed lower than where we want them to be and where they want to be. They have to make, like I said, tremendous growth. In order to do that, they have to themselves show evidence of growth. So the 75th percentile is tremendous growth. In addition to the 75th percentile, which is a score or a target of 3.67, they also have to meet what's called a confidence range. So there's 2 triggers in this one, or 2 thresholds they need to meet in order to meet teacher performance. A threshold of VAM score of 3.67, and a lower limit confidence interval of 3.0. All that means is I can be 95% sure, almost certainly, that a student is an above, excuse me, that a teacher is an above average teacher by putting them in that confidence interval. So let me show you what that looks like. This is a conceptual example. So we have student growth, and we want to know what the impact a teacher has on student achievement through student growth. And so we use a statistical technique that creates a VAM score. And the way we do that is we have at least one prior year's test score, and then we have a test score from the current year. If we have the current year's test score, we can create a statistical target based on all of these various demographics. And let me also say that the plus 15, the minus 3, the plus 1, those are not set, they're not static. This is just an example for an individual student. So let's say in this example, we have a student who in 2025, they get a particular test score. A student, when we're looking at their growth, is going to be compared with like students. So they're going through this calculation, they're going to say, okay, a student starts out in the 4th grade with a 3rd grade SC Ready math score of 400. That student's not going to be compared to a student who had a 3rd grade math score of a 660. They're going to be compared to a 3rd grade math score student who is at 400 or the nearest neighbor. If there's no one in the state and that at the 4th grade who has a 3rd grade score of 400, they go to the nearest neighbor, which is probably a 399 or a 401. But you can imagine across the state, there are many students with a 400 math on the 3rd grade score. So they take and they benchmark where the student started the previous score. And they say, okay, who all from around the state started at that level? So there may be 1,000 students. Okay, so how far did they grow? If all of these peers started out at 400 in math in the 3rd grade, what was their score in 4th grade math? So, and then they look simply to say, did they grow more than average growth or less than average growth? If they grew more, then it might be a plus 15. It might be a plus 1 if they didn't grow much, but they grew more than the peer group. If they didn't, it might be -2, -3. So, and they take all of these demographics. So they say, okay, who tested, given a 3rd grade math score of 400, did that particular student test at the beginning, middle, or the end of the test window? And they compare them. If it was the beginning of the test window, now we have a 4th grade student with a 400 math score in 3rd grade. They tested at the beginning of the window. They're a male, they're Hispanic, they're ELL, which is ML. They are free reduced price lunch, or PIP. They are non-students with disabilities in this example. Well, and let me just stop there. So they compare a student like that to other students in the state like that. So it's very much an apples to apples comparison. So they get the nearest type of student scoring at the closest possible previous achievement and compare their growth to their peers. And it really is a peer comparison. Not only do they do that, but if you look at that class average demographics, they also say, okay, what kind of class are you learning in? Are most of them high poverty, mid, low? So they get an average. They take the percentage of poverty within the classroom. They'll take the percentage of each of the races, of ML students, of students with disabilities. So they then take that average and look for students like that one in classrooms that look like the classroom in which they're studying. So again, it's very much an apples to apples comparison. So then they take that 2020, they set that target and then they look to see, so here's what my peer did. Was I higher than my peer group or lower than my peer group? If I'm higher, then I exceeded my target. And then how much did I exceed the target by? Was it 1 point? Was it 20 points? And then they do the same for students if they didn't meet the target. If they did meet the target, how much was it by? Was it by 1 point, 5 points, 10 points? So they do that for every 4th through 8th grade student. If we're talking about Alexander Elementary as an example, for the 4th and 5th grade students. The reason they don't do it for the 3rd grade students, you have to have a previous year's score. And this is just another example of what I showed you. In this model, you can have a very low performing student with various demographics. They're going to be compared to a very low performing student who started out low performing with very similar demographics, again, coming from very similar classrooms. And so it doesn't matter in this case. An academically gifted, high-performing student in ELA will not be compared, never be compared to a low-performing student in ELA. So then, in this example, you can see you have teacher A and teacher B. So they aggregate all of those individual students within a classroom to come up with a teacher VAM score. So again, teacher A in this case had high growth. This would be considered above average value added. The teacher on the right would be considered below average value added, because more or to a further degree, students did not keep up with their peers across the state. And you can also see the points above, 3.25 versus 1.25. So what this looks like on a scale, the state produces, in education analytics, produce a scale from 0 to 6. 3 is always the state average. Doesn't matter what grade level, what subject area, 3 for VAM is always the state average. And remember the measure that I talked about, they had to hit 3.67. So I placed a black line, a vertical line there on that scale at about 3.67. So that's the target for VAM growth. Remember, state average is 3. So when I also include that confidence interval of a 3, again, what I'm assured of is they have to have an absolute observed score of 3.67 or higher. But in psychometrics, you have error. For example, if I take the same test for infinity, I'm going to score differently. I may be hungry one day. Something may have happened to my family the night before. My girlfriend broke up with me. So lots of different reasons for error. So given that, then we have confidence intervals around variability based on those factors. All the confidence interval tells me is I can rest assured that these are above average teachers. They may not be exactly, they're likely 3.67 or higher, wherever they scored, 3.67 or above. But even if they're not, they're above average. So that's the VAM model. Those, again, are teachers 4th through 8th grade who teach ELA and or math. And a teacher who will say they're in 4th grade, they teach ELA and math, because most of our elementary schools are termed self-contained. I'll teach, as an elementary teacher, I'll teach ELA, math, science, and social studies. They do not have to meet ELA and math. Teacher only has to meet ELA, or they only have to meet math in order with that 3.67 and the confidence interval of 3. So the second type of teacher are teachers who are tested in ELA and or math in the 3rd grade, or science teachers in 4th and 6th grade. Their students still take the SC Ready. So the measure to meet that teacher goal is set where 50% of their students have to meet or exceed standard on SC Ready, whether it's science or whether it's ELA or math. So different measure for these students because VAM doesn't exist for these. Don't get too caught up in this. All this is saying is we're not going to count a student who came to your school 2 weeks before testing and make you responsible for them. We're not going to count a student who is, as an example, EEI, which means they're unfunded. It's a code we use in PowerSchool. It means that typically in high school specifically, they'll come to maybe take an AP course or maybe take a science course. But they're not tested, and so we're also not going to use them as part of the denominator or the calculation. So this just shows us the rules, and we've shared this with teachers. It shows the rules by which we include students or exclude students from the calculation, which is very fair. And it also mirrors the report cards as well. So for our teacher goals, the results, 10 of 13 teachers at Alexander met the teacher goal, and at Lakeview, 4 of 21 teachers met the Elevate teacher goals. Welcome any questions that you might have.
Ms. Levinas Wells?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Dr. Royster, for those teachers and administrators at Lakeview where they did not meet, how will that affect them for the upcoming year? And what I'm saying is, I'm thinking maybe some of them are frustrated because they went in with the perception that they would be making some bonus money, and now they're not. And 4 of the 21 did, but how will this affect those 17 that didn't? And are they frustrated? Are they concerned? I just don't know.
Well, I think first, as a reminder, and Jason, pull that back up. If you look at everything that's in the lighter block to the left, they're all being compensated at an amount that exceeds their colleagues across the district, except for Alexander. Does not affect that in any way. So, because there were higher expectations for what goes on there. So they will continue to receive, if you're talking specifically about a teacher, they will continue to receive at minimum $5,000 more than any other teacher with their same years of experience and educational level. They are well positioned right now, building upon what they did this year to reach that status next year. Now, we were very clear from the outset, and there's a slide in there that Dr. McCrary has, and he's presented it to employees on the front end, and it's been presented multiple times during the year. They have to reach, as a school, average or above, and average or above, and average or above in overall rating, achievement, and progress. If you pull up that other slide, Dr. McCrary will show you on their report card, while they did receive average overall, they did not make average or higher in academic achievement. On the other hand, Alexander did. Now, the challenge at Alexander will be, once you have made that progress, there is a challenge to sustain that progress in a shifting environment. So, as I said, I met with the Lakeview faculty yesterday, actually. Commend them on their effort. As I said to them, they've established a framework and an expectation that if they will continue what they have done, there's every reason to believe they can reach average and average and average. So we're very clear. I'm sure they're disappointed that they didn't get there because they did work hard. But the model was set up to do certain things. And as you'll recall, it's set up for 4 years to create at least 3 years of data. So we want to make sure we follow that model as closely as we possibly can follow it so that Dr. McCrary and his team can analyze it with statistical significance so we can see, has it done what it set out to do? Hopefully then we can, among other things, apply for what we believe will be an increasing amount of state dollars to support this sort of model and to see if this is something that we need to put in place at other schools. So we need to be very careful about not changing the model. Because one thing, it was set at a threshold of 50%. That 50th percentile is probably going to change over those 2 or 3 years, so we need to be real careful how we do that, because that 50th percentile has now gotten a little bit bigger than the 50th percentile, making it a little easier to attain. So we just got to be very careful about that and make sure, and I believe that Mr. Rice, the new principal there, has done, he was there last year as an assistant principal. He's done an excellent job of keeping faculty focused and positive and understanding this is a step process. I don't know that any of us expected that either of these schools would reach school-wide bonuses in year one when we set the criteria.
I definitely think Dr. Rice is doing a great job. And they had a great principal prior to the first year. And
Dr. Couch did an excellent job leading this effort.
Yes.
And I don't know that it's reasonable to expect either school, you got 4 years worth for them to get each year.
Right.
Ideally, that would be great, but it becomes much more difficult to sustain that over time.
Well, I know they're staying pretty positive over there, and I appreciate you going over there yesterday. I knew about that, so thank you so much. No further
Thank you, ma'am.
questions.
Ms. Mosley.
I think my question was answered, but I'll ask it anyway. Since Dr. Royster touched on it, I remember when you brought this to the board for our initial vote, that's something you said that you had been talking closely with Superintendent Weaver about the fact that if this works, this could potentially be a model that she's very interested to see how it works, because it could potentially be a model that could be applied at other schools outside of our county, not just within our district. So is this something that you continue, are we going to wait to the end of 3 years to report back to her? Or is this something that obviously these ratings she gets now, but I guess I'm just wondering.
I actually had a conversation with her Wednesday of last week. We were at the same event in Columbia, and told her we'd gotten initial results, and they looked very positive. And so I talked with her then about following up with her and sharing it more in depth, because it was just a short conversation about, we were very pleased with the results we were getting. And yes, and they are running, I don't remember how many different models statewide, but they only had about $5 million to fund, if I remember correctly. And they are using different models in different places. This one seems, at least from what I've seen of them, that this seems, though it may not seem right now, this seems the most clearly understandable about how you get to that point. I think you might have seen the reports on some of the others, Dr. McCrary.
I've seen a few, and some, I don't know how they would be sustainable.
So there's a question of that. And as difficult as this is to sit here and process, and you have to go through it several times, I think, to get a thorough understanding of it. But it's pretty easy to remember. You got to be average and average and average or better in those three categories. But all this other, in all those slides that Dr. McCrary showed about the individual bonus attainment, you know, you kind of, well, nothing against Jason's presentation, but, you know, you get way down in that. And, whoa. But the bottom line to that is you're judged for this bonus as an individual teacher on how you moved your students that you had control over their teaching, your instruction of them, for this period of time, and where did they start and where did they end compared to someone like them. That's pretty, now all that math calculation in it, you know, not so much so, but that's pretty easy to explain that to people, I think. For the general public to understand, well, this is how a teacher is earning this extra money, and for teachers that, you know, statistics not necessarily their subject area, for them to easily understand, well, that's what I need to do. Because, and you mentioned this earlier about, you know, this whole thing is so complex. In that last discussion we had, it is complex, but it is also at the same time, this will sound strange, it is also simple. Then that simple becomes complex again. Complex understanding all this and all those test score ratings and all. The bottom line, though, to move the school forward, which moving the school forward, obviously we're moving students forward. And we want to move every student forward. So it comes down to where does that student, what skills, knowledge do they possess when they come to you, and how far can you move them before they leave you? And if you will focus on that, all the rest of this stuff will work itself out. Now then where it becomes complex again is how do you then move them from this point to this point, and recognizing that even though for this purpose they're being compared to someone exactly like them, everybody in their class is not exactly alike. Though there's a calculation in there for what does the class complexion look like, as far as their, as a group, how they would traditionally perform. So it's almost as, it's easy to say, it's very hard to do. We're going to take every individual student where they were, and we're going to get them as far as we can get them by the end of the year. And if we do that and we do it as well as we can, with as many as we can, we'll be where we want to be. That will result in some reward.
Well, I appreciate that, and I have been pleased with the different reports that we've had about how it seems like we're moving in the right direction. My second question, it's related to this, is more of a staffing issue. So obviously, this might be to Ms. LaVenta's point, the challenge is to keeping everyone motivated, keeping everyone focused on the goal or whatever. Are we seeing, I would think that an important success factor for this is to keep staffing as consistent as possible for the next, for that period of time that we're trying to, you know, collect this data. Are we being successful with our HR, like retention of, I know we're going to lose people here and there, but
Yeah.
are we overall being successful with our retention for the teachers and the administrators that bought into this model? Because obviously it's different than anything we're doing anywhere else at our other schools.
I don't know if Philip or Dr. McDavid has that number in front of them, so any answer I'd say about it right now would be kind of anecdotal.
Okay.
I'd rather us send you a number.
That's fine.
We know our turnover district-wide for this past year, and I believe Philip's going to do a report next month on HR, is right at 10%. So what we would look for would be 10% or lower. Traditionally, those schools have had higher turnover.
I just think since these two schools are unique in terms of the incentive piece of it, it would be interesting to see how that's compared to the rest of the district, because
I think a kind of a corollary to that, it will be interesting to see how much difficulty, if any, do they have, aside from other schools, to fill those vacancies they might have, which we don't know that yet either.
Okay.
But we'll get that number to you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm done.
Dr. Presley. Ms. Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. I'm going to try to figure out how to pose this question. It says tested teachers 3rd through 8th grade. So is that, tell me what you mean by tested teachers. What is that?
They are teaching a subject that is tested.
Okay.
So at the elementary level, it would be each regular classroom teacher. At the middle school level, obviously, it would be that subject area teacher.
Elementary school is so different than middle school as far as not only the teaching is concerned, but also the teachers are concerned. Do you think that maybe us lumping 3rd through 8th grade is having an effect on the overall status? You see what I'm saying? Like, we've got Alexander is doing so well, it would seem, and it looks like Lakeview may have struggled. Is that because as far as compensation is concerned, we've got elementary school teachers compared to middle school teachers, or do you see where I'm trying to go with that question?
Ask that a different way.
Okay, can you help me?
Because you can argue, it's kind of like that old saying about somebody goes to apply for a social studies job and asks me to teach the world round or flat. Tell me how you want me to teach it.
Yeah.
You can argue it either way.
Okay.
All right, so if you're the middle school teacher, you're only focused on that one subject. So it should be, you can make the argument, it should be easier for you to move your math students because you're only teaching them math.
Mm-hmm.
So on the reverse of that, in elementary, you say, well, look, I got to teach them ELA and math and science, and I've got to do everything. So that's harder. Well, then the secondary teacher will come back and say, well, no, you have it easier because you have them all day. So you have a greater length of time to build a relationship with them. You could choose to spend more time on math or English. I'm a secondary teacher. I've only got the 52 minutes that I have them each day. So I think at the end of the day, you can probably make an argument. I guess Jason could referee this as far as who makes the better argument if he can quantify it. You can make an argument either way that, well, it's harder here or it's easier here.
Okay.
I think those arguments sort of even out, but that's another thing for us to look at as we get more than 1 year of data. Because the other thing is report card calculations are different by level.
Right.
So that's another factor. But we don't have, I don't think we have, I think Jason would probably say the same thing, and he can speak for himself. We don't have enough data to draw conclusions, which is why it's important to us to stick to the model till we have more data. Would that?
That's accurate.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. All of those arguments make a lot of sense. Thank you. Yeah, I think, maybe that is something to look at there in the next 2, 3, 4 years, figure that out. But good, thank you. That's it.
Anyone else? Hearing none, then that concludes item 4.02 and also this portion of today's agenda, and I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sailors. Our fifth matter of business is building and grounds, and Ms. Leventis Wells will be chairing this section. So, Ms. Leventis Wells, I'll give you the floor at this time.
Thank you so much. At this time, we'll look at facilities. And Colonel, do you have any information on facilities projects update?
Special updates, but I'd be glad to try to answer any questions.
Okay. Is it Dr. Presley?
Thank you. This shouldn't be a shock to anybody. I'm looking at the high school parking lot situation, and I'm super pleased for Eastside, Hillcrest, and Jail Man that we've completed those. We still have a TBD out beside the Greenville High 100 spaces. I had the good fortune or misfortune, however you want to say it, to be cutting across town during dismissal the other day at 3:45. And y'all, it was a mass exodus of humanity spilling across the streets. We all know that this is a safety issue, period. And I'm hoping that we will continue to press on this in the right ways. More facts, which is what I'm dealing in right now. The opportunity to park on streets is closing in. This doesn't have anything to do with decisions that are made at our district level, but it seems like doors are closing every time we turn around. So we have a critical mass of parents and their children, and they're trying to get them to school so that they can participate in after-school activities, get there back and forth safely. So I will continue to do my part by describing the reality of this and keeping it on everybody's radars. So Ms. Carlin, there's no other update though, correct?
If I might speak to that. There's one item that we will update you on because it's a contractual matter in executive session before the board meeting next week. The other is Colonel Carlin has developed with A&E firm to the ability we could put them there, some limited additional parking spaces as a proposal on the back drive at Greenville High. Now, that will require OSF to allow the mixing of student traffic and bus traffic. We do not yet have that approval. We do not yet have a SCDOT approval on entering the street with additional car traffic from that point. So we're working on that. It provides some relief. The other is an off-campus solution that could provide some substantive relief, but it's too early to speak to that in public because it is a contractual matter.
Any further? Thank you, Dr. Presley. Ms. Doolin? Oh, we have 9 seconds.
I can be quick.
I'd like to extend for 2 minutes without objection.
I've done this in 9 seconds.
Go.
Does anyone have an idea of how much money we are saving by adding on to this building instead of buying a new property and building a new building?
We can get you an estimate on that. We looked at acquisition of a building that would have required renovation, and the acquisition cost on that building, if I recall correctly, was like $26 million.
Yes, sir.
Is that right? And it was built in 1958. Now, it's fairly centrally located, but it would have far exceeded the simple addition to this building. But we can give you that. We can also give you what square footage of a new facility similar in size to this plus the addition, along with a site acquisition. And site acquisition is a huge issue from the point of availability and cost.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Ms. Goodwin-Cowell? I'm going to have to extend for 5 minutes without objection. Ms. Goodwin-Cowell?
Dr. Royster, are we going to go back to the city about trying to build a parking deck that they turned down for over there at Greenville High? Wasn't we trying to
We have a meeting scheduled with the city administrator, Julie, when's that? To pursue a number of different avenues. The issue with the parking deck is the security. We were asked by a previous city administration to provide some input to them on that. And we provided them a study as to cost for the construction of that parking deck on campus, as well as what we believed it would require to make certain it was secure. Because we have to always remember that high school operates not 24 hours a day, but many days, 18 hours a day. And that's the parking lot for that school, the student parking area. The other one is extremely small. There's area out front really for visitors and a faculty lot on the one side. So for that to be safe, for students to be getting out of a vehicle inside a parking deck, there were certain parameters we established for that, and the cost to do that is not something at that time that the city wanted to entertain, nor was it cost effective for us to do it and reserve it exclusively for our use. A parking deck is, Colonel, double the cost of surface parking.
It's more than double.
But it's landlocked over there. How are you
Well,
gonna get more parking?
It wasn't when
spots?
we tried to pursue buying that additional property that rezoning of was turned down.
Okay.
But it's buying small parcels, which is a problem. It's becoming a problem all over the county. It is particularly a problem in the city of Greenville to be able to buy any large parcel. And in the city, a large parcel is probably 3 acres. Now, other parts of the county, it's not so much so. And every time we get into dealing with multiple property owners, the cost skyrockets.
Are there any talks with the people that are over there renovating where the county was? All of that property over there?
That's a county's development. So their intent is to develop that to churn revenue.
Okay. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Dr. Royster, I've just been thinking, but is there any way we're looking at renovating this building going up? Because I know we can't go out.
No, we're actually going out.
I know
Not going up.
Going out, but can you go up to? Nope.
So structurally, the building will not support a third level.
Okay, good enough.
So the cheapest, the least expensive is to go,
Say it again. The cheapest
the least expensive
is to go out.
is to go out.
Sorry, y'all. All right. Any other questions? Hearing none, I will turn facilities, buildings and grounds is over. So Dr. Stiles, Chairman Stiles, it's back.
Thank you, Mrs. Leventis Wells. This concludes our Committee of the Whole agenda today. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mrs. Leventis Wells has made a motion. Mrs. Doolin has made a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion carries, and our Committee of the Whole meeting is adjourned at 12:21 p.m. Again, happy Veterans Day, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.